The Arizona desert swallowed Ray Callahan whole the night his daughter's ashes scattered into the wind. 3 years later, he still rode that same highway, searching for death that never came. Leather jacket stained with dust and regret. Harley engine screaming through empty darkness. Then he saw her. A child's body lying motionless on the roadside gravel, blood pooling black under the moonlight. Ray throttled past. Not his problem. Not anymore. But 50 yards down that lonely road, his bike slowed. Stopped. The engine ticked in the silence while something buried deep inside his chest cracked open. When he walked back and the little girl's eyes opened, she whispered 4 words that destroyed him. Please don't leave me. Before we ride into this storm together, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. This story goes deep, and I need to know the Brotherhood is listening. Now let's find out what happens when a man who lost everything meets a child who has nothing left to lose. Ray Callahan's Harley-Davidson roared through the Arizona night like a dying animal searching for somewhere quiet to collapse. The headlight beam cut through absolute darkness, illuminating nothing but cracked asphalt and the skeletal remains of roadside crosses marking where other desperate souls had met their end. Wind tore at his leather vest, but Ray barely felt it anymore. 3 years of riding the same empty highways had stripped away most of his ability to feel anything at all. The desert stretched infinite on both sides of Highway 87, a landscape so barren it seemed designed specifically to swallow human hope. No streetlights, no gas stations, no signs of civilization for 60 miles in either direction, just endless darkness punctuated by distant mountains that looked like broken teeth against the starless sky. Ray's hands gripped the handlebars with the mechanical precision of a man who no longer cared where the road ended. His knuckles bore old scars from fights he couldn't remember winning. His face carried lines carved by grief that time refused to heal. The speedometer climbed past 90. Ray didn't slow down. He never did anymore. 3 years ago, his daughter Emma died in a Phoenix hospital, while Ray sat in a county jail 70 miles away, arrested for a bar fight that meant nothing. By the time they released him, she was already gone. Cancer had taken her while he rotted in a cell, missing her final words, her last breath, everything that mattered. The doctor said she called for him at the end. Ray's ex-wife said Emma died afraid and alone, reaching for a father who never showed up. That truth lived inside Ray's chest like a knife that twisted deeper every time he tried to breathe. So he stopped trying. He sold everything, packed his grief onto his motorcycle, and disappeared into the desert searching for something he couldn't name. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe punishment. Maybe just a stretch of road empty enough to finally let him forget. The Harley's engine coughed. The fuel gauge had been flashing empty for 20 minutes, but Ray ignored it the same way he ignored everything else. If the bike died out here, fine. If he had to walk through the desert until dehydration or exhaustion claimed him, better. Men like Ray Callahan didn't deserve second chances. They deserved exactly what the desert offered: silence, emptiness, and an ending nobody would remember. Then his headlight caught something that didn't belong. A small shape lay crumpled on the shoulder of the highway, barely visible against the dark gravel. Ray's first thought was roadkill, coyote or javelina struck by a semi and left to rot. But as the distance closed, the shape resolved into something worse. A child's sneaker, pink with cartoon characters, still attached to a small foot that wasn't moving. Ray's hands locked on the brakes. The Harley skidded, rear tire fishtailing across the asphalt before grinding to a stop in a cloud of dust and burned rubber. His heart hammered against his ribs for the first time in months. He sat frozen, engine idling, staring at the motionless figure 20 yards behind him. Not his problem, not anymore. Ray twisted the throttle, ready to disappear into the darkness and forget what he'd seen. Children died every day. The world was full of tragedies that weren't his responsibility. He'd already failed the one child who mattered. Whatever nightmare this was, it belonged to someone else. But his hands wouldn't move. The engine idled. The night pressed down like a physical weight. Ray closed his eyes and saw Emma's face the last time he'd visited her in the hospital before his arrest. She'd been so small in that bed, IV lines running into her thin arms, her bald head resting on a pillow covered with drawings she'd made during chemo. She'd smiled when he walked in, even though she was dying, even though he'd already missed 3 visits that month because he was too drunk or too angry to face what was happening. She'd smiled and asked if he'd brought her favorite candy. Ray had forgotten. Again. God damn it, he whispered into the darkness. He killed the engine. Silence crashed down like a collapsing building. Ray climbed off the bike, his boots hitting pavement that still radiated the day's brutal heat. His knees protested. Too many years, too many miles, too many fights his body didn't recover from anymore. He walked back toward the small shape with the slow, reluctant steps of a man approaching his own execution. The child was a little girl, maybe 7 years old, lying face down in the gravel. Blood matted her dark hair. Her pink t-shirt was torn and stained with dirt and what looked like dried blood. One arm stretched toward the highway as if she'd been crawling before collapse claimed her. Her legs were covered in cuts and bruises that looked deliberate, patterned, inflicted. Ray's stomach turned. He'd seen enough violence in his years running with the Hells Angels to recognize when someone had been hurt intentionally. This wasn't an accident. This was cruelty. He knelt beside her, his leather vest creaking in the silence. His hand hovered over her neck, searching for a pulse he was certain wouldn't be there. But beneath his calloused fingers, he felt it, faint, irregular, but alive. The girl's skin was burning with fever. Her breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps. "Kid?" Ray's voice came out rough, unused to speaking. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. The girl didn't move. Ray looked around, searching for any sign of a vehicle, a campsite, another human being. Nothing. Just endless desert darkness stretching in every direction. Someone had dumped this child here to die. Ray should call the police. That was the right move. The responsible move. But his phone had died 2 days ago, and the nearest town was 40 miles back the way he'd come. By the time he rode there and brought help, the girl would be dead. Ray knew enough about desert survival to understand her window was closing fast. His hands moved on instinct, checking her injuries with the rough competence of someone who'd patched up wounded brothers after bar fights, and worse. Broken ribs, maybe. Severe dehydration, cuts that needed cleaning, but nothing immediately fatal if he could get her somewhere safe. Except there was nowhere safe. Not out here. Not in the middle of nothing. Ray's jaw clenched. He stood, ready to make the hard choice. Ride back toward civilization. Hope she survived until help arrived. But as he turned toward his motorcycle, the girl's hand shot out and grabbed his leather vest with surprising strength. Her eyes opened, unfocused and glassy with fever, staring up at him with the kind of terror Ray recognized from combat veterans and trauma survivors. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't leave me." Something inside Ray's chest broke open. Not the clean break of bone, but the messy rupture of scar tissue that had been holding him together through 3 years of grief and guilt. Those 4 words, identical to the last thing Emma had said before Ray got arrested, before everything fell apart, hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The girl's hand gripped his vest like a lifeline, her eyes pleading with him not to be another person who abandoned her to die alone. Ray's vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing the weakness back down where it belonged. Then he bent down, carefully sliding his arms beneath the girl's small body, lifting her with the same gentleness he'd once used carrying Emma to bed when she was too tired to walk. The child weighed almost nothing, just bone and fever and desperate, fading life. "I got you," Ray heard himself say, the words foreign in his mouth. "You're not dying out here." He carried her to his Harley, the girl's head resting against his chest. His mind raced through logistics, where to go, how to keep her stable, what the hell he was doing getting involved when involvement had only ever brought him pain. But his hands kept moving, positioning her carefully on the bike, wrapping his leather jacket around her shivering body despite the desert heat. Ray climbed on in front of her, pulling her arms around his waist, feeling her weak grip struggle to hold on. The engine roared to life. He twisted the throttle, accelerating back the way he'd come, toward the last town he'd passed hours earlier. Wind screamed past them. The girl's fevered body pressed against his back, her breath hot and irregular against his spine. Ray rode faster than was safe, the Harley eating miles of empty highway while his mind screamed at him to stop being an idiot. He didn't know this kid, didn't know what nightmare she'd escaped from or who might be looking for her. Getting involved meant complications, questions, attention from authorities who'd want answers Ray couldn't give. Smart money said drop her at the nearest emergency room and disappear before anyone asked his name. But Emma's ghost rode beside him in the darkness, and Ray couldn't outrun her anymore. The town emerged from the desert like a fever dream, a cluster of dying buildings held together by habit and poverty. population 300, according to a faded sign. One gas station, one diner, a handful of mobile homes scattered like discarded toys. Ray pulled into the gravel parking lot of the town's only motel, a single-story dump called the Desert Rose that looked like it hadn't seen a paying customer in months. The office lights were off. Ray killed his engine and sat for a moment, the girl still clinging weakly to his waist, neither of them moving. His reflection stared back from the motel's dark window, a scarred, exhausted man holding a dying child, both of them covered in dust and blood and bad decisions. "Shit," Ray muttered. He carried the girl inside, kicking the office door until a light flickered on, and an old man appeared, bleary-eyed and annoyed. The manager took one look at Ray's scarred face and the unconscious child and reached for the phone. Ray dropped cash on the counter, $300, most of what he had left, and said 3 words that ended the conversation. "Room, now, quiet." The old man hesitated. Ray's hand moved toward the pistol tucked in his belt, not threatening, just reminding the world what kind of man they were dealing with. The manager slid a key across the counter and went back to bed without another word. Some lessons didn't need repeating. The room was exactly what Ray expected: stained carpet, broken air conditioner, single bed with sheets that smelled like cigarettes and failure. He laid the girl down carefully, her small body barely making an impression on the sagging mattress. Her eyes rolled beneath closed lids. Her breathing rattled. Ray stood over her, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides, completely unprepared for what happened next. The girl's eyes opened. She looked at him with sudden, terrifying clarity. "They killed my mommy," she whispered. "They killed my daddy. They hurt me and threw me away." Then her eyes closed again, consciousness slipping away before Ray could respond. He stood frozen in the dim motel room, her words echoing in the silence. "They killed my mommy. They killed my daddy. Not an accident. Not a random tragedy. Someone had murdered this child's parents and tried to erase her too." Ray's hands started shaking. Not from fear, but from something worse. The cold, familiar rage that lived in his bones. The violence he'd spent 3 years trying to drown. He looked down at the unconscious girl, her battered body testament to cruelty Ray couldn't comprehend, and felt the last fragments of his carefully maintained numbness crack apart. Whoever hurt this kid was still out there, and now they were looking for her. Ray moved to the window, his hand resting on the pistol in his belt, eyes scanning the empty parking lot. Nothing. Just darkness and the distant sound of highway traffic. But his instincts, honed through years of surviving situations that should have killed him, screamed danger. The same instincts that kept him alive in bar fights, gang wars, and the kind of violence civilians couldn't imagine. Something was coming. He could feel it. Ray turned back to the girl, watching her chest rise and fall with labored breaths. He should leave, disappear back into the desert before whatever storm was chasing her caught up. Self-preservation 101. Don't get involved in other people's nightmares. But Emma's ghost sat in the corner of the room, watching him with eyes that carried all his failures. And Ray couldn't run anymore. He pulled a chair to the window and sat down, pistol resting on his thigh, eyes fixed on the darkness outside. His body settled into the familiar posture of a man preparing for violence, shoulders loose, breathing steady, every sense alert for the first sign of threat. The night stretched ahead like an open wound. The girl stirred on the bed, mumbling words Ray couldn't understand. He glanced back at her, this small, broken thing that had somehow become his responsibility, and felt the weight of it settle across his shoulders like chains. Outside, a vehicle's headlights swept across the motel's far end. Ray's hand tightened on his pistol. The vehicle slowed, crawling past the parking lot, its occupants invisible behind tinted windows. Then it accelerated away, disappearing into the night. But Ray knew better than to relax. That was a search pattern. Someone looking for something. Someone who'd be back. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a crumpled photograph, the only picture of Emma he still carried. She smiled at the camera, 8 years old, holding the stuffed rabbit Ray had won for her at a county fair. Before cancer. Before everything fell apart. Before Ray proved himself to be exactly the kind of father who failed when it mattered most. "I'm sorry, baby girl," he whispered to the photograph. "I'm so goddamn sorry." He put the picture away and returned his attention to the window. The desert night pressed against the glass, infinite and unforgiving. Somewhere out there, people who hurt children were hunting. And Ray Callahan, Broken, grieving, violent Ray Callahan was all that stood between them and the little girl breathing softly in the darkness behind him. The girl coughed. Ray heard her shift on the bed, her breath catching with pain. He wanted to help but didn't know how. Medical care wasn't something men like him understood. He knew how to hurt people, not heal them. But Emma's ghost watched from the corner, and Ray couldn't fail again. He grabbed a towel from the bathroom, ran cold water over it, and placed it gently on the girl's forehead. Her skin burned with fever. Her eyes moved beneath closed lids, trapped in nightmares Ray couldn't reach. He sat on the edge of the bed, his calloused hand resting awkwardly on her small shoulder, offering the only comfort he remembered, presence, just being there. "You're safe," he lied, because sometimes lies were the only kindness available. "Nobody's going to hurt you now." The girl's breathing steadied slightly. Ray stayed where he was, watching her sleep, his mind racing through scenarios and survival strategies. He needed supplies, medical equipment, information about who she was and who wanted her dead. But most of all, he needed to figure out what the hell he was doing. Hours crawled past. The darkness outside gradually lightened toward dawn. Ray didn't sleep, couldn't. His body existed in that hyper-vigilant state that combat veterans and career criminals knew intimately, exhausted but unable to rest, every nerve firing, every sense scanning for danger that might arrive without warning. The girl woke just before sunrise. Her eyes opened slowly, confused, searching the unfamiliar room until they found Ray sitting in the chair by the window. She didn't scream, didn't panic, just studied him with the kind of premature wisdom that trauma carved into children who survived things they shouldn't have seen. "Who are you?" Her voice was small but steady. "Ray." He didn't move, letting her process his presence without feeling threatened. "Found you on the highway last night. You were hurt." The girl's hand moved to her side, touching the bruises there with a wince. Memory flooded back into her expression, fear, pain, loss. Her eyes filled with tears she fought to control. "They're looking for me," she whispered. "The bad men. They'll find me." Ray's jaw tightened. What bad men? But before she could answer, headlights swept across the motel parking lot. This time, the vehicle didn't pass. It stopped. Doors opened. Ray heard boots on gravel, multiple sets, moving with purpose. He was on his feet instantly, pistol in hand, moving to the window. 3 men walked toward the motel office, their movements coordinated, professional. They weren't random travelers. These were hunters. Ray turned to the girl. "Can you walk?" She nodded, fear washing over her face. "Then we're leaving. Right now." He grabbed his leather jacket, wrapped it around her shoulders, and moved to the door. His hand rested on the knob while his mind calculated angles, timing, how many seconds they had before this became a firefight. The Harley sat 20 feet away. If they moved fast, stayed quiet, they might make it. Ray pulled the door open. Cold desert air rushed in. He stepped out, the girl pressed against his side, his eyes scanning the parking lot. The 3 men stood at the office door, one of them showing something to the manager, probably a photograph, looking for her. Ray and the girl moved toward the Harley with practiced silence. 10 feet. 5. His hand reached for the handlebars when the office door opened and one of the hunters stepped back into the parking lot, his eyes sweeping across the motel units. Their gazes locked. For one frozen moment, nobody moved. The hunter's hand started toward his jacket. Ray's pistol came up. The girl's hand gripped his vest. The desert morning held its breath. Then Ray fired. One shot, precise and brutal, dropping the hunter before he could draw his weapon. The sound shattered the silence like breaking glass. The other 2 men erupted from the office, weapons appearing in their hands, and the parking lot exploded into chaos. Ray grabbed the girl, threw her onto the Harley, and fired 2 more shots toward the office to buy seconds they didn't have. Return fire cracked past his head, close enough to feel the pressure wave. He climbed onto the bike, the girl's arms wrapping around his waist, and kicked the engine to life. The Harley roared. Bullets punched through metal and glass. Ray twisted the throttle, and they launched forward as the parking lot disintegrated into violence behind them. The girl screamed against his back. Ray hunched low, steering one-handed while his other hand fired blindly behind them, not aiming, just creating chaos to cover their escape. They hit the highway at 60 miles per hour and accelerating. Ray glanced in the mirror and saw the 2 surviving hunters running for their vehicle. The chase was on. The Harley screamed down Highway 87 while dawn broke across the desert in shades of blood and gold. Ray's mind raced faster than the engine, calculating distances, fuel, options. They had maybe 20 minutes before the hunter's vehicle caught up. After that, it was open road and superior firepower against a motorcycle and prayers. "What's your name, Rhett?" Ray shouted over the wind. The girl's voice barely reached him. "Sophia. Listen to me, Sophia. Whatever happens, you hold on. You don't let go. You understand?" "I understand." Her small body pressed against his back, trusting him completely, and Ray felt the weight of that trust like a physical thing. This child, this stranger he'd known for less than 12 hours, had somehow become his responsibility, his purpose, the only thing standing between him and the empty violence he'd been riding toward for 3 years. The highway stretched ahead, endless and unforgiving. In the mirror, headlights appeared, closing fast. The hunters weren't giving up. Why would they? Whatever Sophia witnessed, whatever she knew, was worth killing for. Ray's hand tightened on the throttle. The Harley surged forward, eating miles of empty asphalt while the desert morning exploded into desperate, dangerous life around them. He'd spent 3 years running from his failures. Now, finally, he had something worth fighting for. But the road ahead grew darker, not lighter. And somewhere in the back of Ray's mind, a question formed that would haunt the miles to come. What kind of men murdered parents and threw children away to die? And what would they do when they finally caught up? The answer roared toward them at 80 miles per hour, and Ray knew, in the cold, certain way that men who lived on the edge of violence always knew, that whatever was coming would be worse than anything he'd survived before. Behind them, the hunter's vehicle closed the distance. Ahead, the desert swallowed the highway whole. And between them, a scarred biker and a terrified child rode toward a war neither of them was ready to fight. The hunter's black SUV filled Ray's mirror close enough now that he could see the driver's face. Cold, professional, the kind of expression that came from years of doing terrible things for money. The vehicle's engine roared, a predator closing on wounded prey. Ray twisted the throttle until the Harley screamed, but physics didn't negotiate. 4 wheels always caught 2 eventually. Sophia's arms tightened around his waist. Her small body pressed against his back like a prayer he didn't deserve to receive. The highway stretched ahead through empty desert, no towns, no cover, nowhere to hide. Just open road and the mathematics of pursuit. Ray's mind raced through options that didn't exist. He could shoot while riding, but hitting anything at 70 miles per hour was Hollywood bullshit. He could try to outrun them, but the fuel gauge was already flashing red. Or he could do what every instinct screamed against: turn and fight. One scarred biker with a half-empty pistol against 3 armed professionals who killed children for a living. The SUV surged closer. 50 yards. 40. Then Ray saw salvation in the form of a dirt road cutting east into the desert hills. Barely visible, probably forgotten. The kind of path only locals and desperate men noticed. He didn't think. Thinking meant hesitation, and hesitation meant death. He yanked the handlebars right, the Harley's tires screaming as they left asphalt for dirt and gravel. The bike fishtailed. Sophia screamed. Ray fought for control as rocks kicked up beneath them, and the desert floor tried to swallow them whole. Behind them, the SUV's brakes shrieked, the driver caught off guard by the sudden turn. By the time they recovered and followed, Ray had already gained precious seconds. The dirt road climbed into rocky hills, twisting between boulders and dried creek beds. Ray rode like a man possessed, taking corners that should have thrown them, jumping washouts that should have broken the bike. Sophia held on, her face buried against his leather vest, trusting him with everything she had left. The SUV followed, but slower, its low clearance and heavy frame struggling with terrain. The Harley navigated through raw momentum and reckless faith. Ray pushed deeper into the hills, following the road until it wasn't a road anymore, just tracks, an instinct, and hope that somewhere ahead lay something that wasn't death. The tracks ended at an abandoned mining camp, 3 collapsed buildings, and a water tower listing like a drunk. Ray killed the engine behind the largest structure, the silence after the roar feeling like pressure against his eardrums. He climbed off, pulled Sophia down, and pressed a finger to his lips. She nodded, her eyes huge with fear but trusting. Ray checked his pistol. 4 rounds left. Not enough. Never enough. The SUV's engine echoed through the hills, growing louder, closer. Ray positioned himself at the building's corner, Sophia crouched behind him, his body between her and whatever came next. His breathing steadied into the cold rhythm of violence, the mental space where fear stopped mattering and only action existed. The SUV rolled into the camp slow and cautious, the hunters learning from their mistakes. It stopped 50 yards out, engine idling, nobody emerging. Smart. They knew Ray was armed, knew he was trapped. Time was on their side. Ray's jaw clenched. Standoff meant the girl died slow from dehydration or fast when they finally moved. Neither was acceptable. "Ray Callahan!" A voice called out from the SUV, amplified through a lowered window. Male, calm, carrying the confidence of men who'd already won. "We know you're here. We know you have the girl." Ray said nothing. Talking was negotiating, and you couldn't negotiate with people who murdered children. "We don't want you, Callahan. Just the girl. Walk away. You live." Simple. Sophia's hand gripped Ray's vest. He glanced back at her, saw Emma's face superimposed over hers. Both small, both terrified, both depending on him not to fail. His throat tightened. "She's a witness to something that doesn't concern you," the voice continued. "Something bigger than both of us. People with real power want her gone. You can't win this. You can only choose how you lose." Ray's finger rested on the trigger. The smart play was exactly what they offered. Walk away, survive. Let the desert swallow one more tragedy that wasn't his responsibility. 3 years ago, he would have taken that deal without hesitation. 3 years ago, he had nothing worth dying for. But Emma's ghost sat in the dust beside Sophia, and Ray discovered he still had one thing left to lose, the chance to be someone other than the man who ran when it mattered. "Go to hell!" Ray shouted back. Silence. Then laughter from the SUV, genuine and amused. "Your choice, brother." The doors opened. 3 men emerged, spreading out with practiced efficiency, using the vehicle for cover. Ray counted weapons. 2 rifles, 1 shotgun, all of them knowing how to use them. His 4 bullets felt like prayers whispered into a hurricane. The first man moved toward the collapsed building on Ray's left, flanking. Ray tracked him, waiting for the shot that would expose him. Patience. Breath. The cold mathematics of violence. The second man started toward the water tower, creating crossfire. Ray's window was closing. He needed to act before they established position. But acting meant exposing himself, and Sophia to fire he couldn't return. The third man stayed by the SUV, rifle raised, covering his partner's movement. The smart one. The dangerous one. Ray made his choice. He aimed at the man moving left and fired once. The shot cracked across the camp, precise and final, and the hunter dropped. The other 2 opened up immediately, bullets chewing through the building's rotted wood, forcing Ray back behind cover that was disintegrating around him. Sophia screamed. Ray grabbed her, dragging them both deeper into the structure as rifle fire tore the morning apart. Splinters exploded. Dust filled the air. The building groaned, damaged supports threatening collapse. Ray fired twice more toward the water tower, not aiming, just buying seconds. His pistol clicked empty. 1 round left, and 2 hunters still moving. He ejected the magazine, slammed his last one home. 3 rounds total. The pistol his brother-in-law had given him years ago with 1 backup mag and a warning Ray never learned to follow. 6 bullets to solve a problem that needed 60. The firing stopped. Tactical silence filled the camp, both sides recalculating. Ray's ears rang. His hands moved on instinct, checking Sophia for injuries, finding none. She stared at him with absolute trust that felt like condemnation. "Listen to me." Ray's voice came low and urgent. "Back of this building, there's a gap in the wall. You go through it, you run. Don't stop, don't look back. Find the highway, flag down a car, tell them to call police." "No." Sophia's voice was small, but iron. "They'll kill you." "They're going to kill me anyway." Ray managed something that might have been a smile. "But maybe not before you get away." "I won't leave you." Tears streaked the dust on her face. "Everyone leaves. My mommy left. My daddy left. You can't leave too." The words hit harder than bullets. Ray saw Emma in the hospital bed, asking why he hadn't visited, not understanding that her father was too weak to watch her die. He'd left her then. Left her at the end when she needed him most. "I'm not leaving." The lie tasted like blood. "I'm giving you a chance." Boot steps crunched on gravel outside, moving closer. The hunters were advancing, knowing Ray's ammunition was spent. knowing the building wouldn't hold. Time was gone. Ray positioned himself at the doorway, pistol raised, ready for the last stand that would buy Sophia maybe 30 seconds. Not enough, but all he had left to give. Then engines roared in the distance. Multiple engines, deep and powerful, the unmistakable thunder of Harley-Davidsons running hard. Ray's head snapped toward the sound. The hunters froze, their attention shifting to the new threat approaching fast. 6 motorcycles crested the hill and roared into the mining camp like the wrath of gods who'd been sleeping too long. The riders wore leather vests marked with patches Ray recognized immediately. The twin lightning bolts and skull of the Iron Brotherhood MC, one of the most dangerous outlaw clubs in the Southwest. The lead rider was a mountain of a man, gray beard down to his chest, arms covered in prison tattoos, eyes carrying the kind of violence that didn't need weapons to be terrifying. He killed his engine 20 feet from the SUV, his brothers forming a semicircle behind him, 6 men who looked like they'd been carved from the same stone as the desert itself. "Gentlemen," the lead rider's voice carried easy authority, "you're on Brotherhood territory. We don't take kindly to uninvited guests." The remaining 2 hunters exchanged glances, recalculating odds that had just shifted dramatically against them. Ray stayed behind cover, his pistol trained on the chaos unfolding, not understanding what was happening but grateful for the reprieve. "This doesn't concern you," one hunter said, trying to sound confident and failing. "You're shooting up our desert." The lead biker swung his leg off his Harley, standing with the casual menace of someone who'd killed men before breakfast and slept fine afterward. "That concerns us. Now you got 2 choices. Leave, or we bury you in the mine shaft behind us. I'm good either way." The hunters weren't stupid. They were outnumbered, outgunned by men who looked like they'd welcomed the excuse for violence. The one by the SUV lowered his rifle fractionally, a gesture of negotiation. "We're looking for a girl," he said. 7 years old. Someone took her from where she belongs." The lead biker's eyes shifted to the collapsed building where Ray and Sophia hid. Something passed across his scarred face. Recognition, calculation, decision. "Don't see any girl." His voice stayed flat. "Just some drifter who got lost. Now you got 10 seconds before we stop being polite." The hunter's jaw clenched. He knew when to fold. He and his partner backed toward the SUV, weapons lowered but ready. Their dead companion left where he fell because men like them didn't risk retrieval. They climbed in, the engine started, and the SUV reversed out of the camp before turning and disappearing into the hills. Silence crashed down. The 6 bikers turned as one to face the building where Ray crouched, their expressions unreadable. The lead rider walked forward, boots crunching on gravel, stopping 10 feet from the doorway. His eyes found Ray through the shadows, cataloging the scarred face, the empty pistol, the small girl pressed against his side. "You got a name, brother?" "Ray. Ray Callahan." Recognition flickered across the biker's face. "Callahan. Rode with the Angels out of Phoenix, didn't you? Back before you disappeared." Ray's grip tightened on his useless pistol. "That was a long time ago." "Was." The biker nodded. "I'm Marcus Stone. They call me Stone. This is my charter." He gestured to the 5 men behind him, each of them studying Ray with the wariness of predators encountering another predator on uncertain ground. "What brings a dead man back to the living?" Ray stood slowly, keeping his body between Sophia and the bikers, his mind racing through scenarios where this ended well. He found none. Outlaw MCs didn't ride into mining camps out of kindness. They wanted something. "Found the girl on the highway," Ray said. "Men were hunting her. Seemed like something worth stopping." Stone's eyes moved to Sophia, taking in her bruised face, torn clothes, the fear she couldn't hide. Something hard passed through his expression, not sympathy, but the cold recognition of cruelty he understood too well. "What's your name, little one?" Sophia looked at Ray. He nodded fractionally. She turned back to Stone, her voice steady despite everything. "Sophia. Sophia." Stone repeated it like he was memorizing evidence. "And where's your family, Sophia?" "Dead." The word came out flat, rehearsed through repetition. "The bad men killed them." Stone's jaw tightened. He looked back at his brothers, some silent communication passing between them that Ray couldn't read. Then Stone's attention returned, his expression hardening into something that looked like decision.
Get on your bike, Callahan. Follow us. We need to talk where walls don't have ears.
Ray hesitated. Following outlaw bikers to a secondary location was how people disappeared into shallow graves, but staying meant waiting for the hunters to return with reinforcements. And something in Stone's eyes, something that looked almost like respect, suggested this wasn't a trap. At least not yet. Come on. Ray took Sophia's hand, leading her toward his Harley. The 6 bikers watched in silence, their presence filling the camp like a storm that hadn't decided whether to break or pass us. Ray settled Sophia on the bike, her arms wrapping around his waist with familiar desperation. Stone mounted his Harley, his brothers following suit. Engines thundered to life, 6 thunderclaps that echoed through the hills. Stone jerked his head toward the trail leading north, and the convoy rolled out, Ray riding in the middle, bracketed by violent men whose intentions remained unclear. They rode for 20 minutes through terrain that gradually shifted from desert to scrubland, following paths that existed only in the memories of men who knew these hills intimately. Finally, they emerged at a compound hidden in a canyon, a collection of metal buildings, parked motorcycles, and the unmistakable infrastructure of an outlaw MC clubhouse. The Iron Brotherhood's fortress looked exactly like what it was, a place where men who didn't fit in civilized society came to build their own civilization. Chain-link fencing, guard towers that had seen better decades, a main hall with the club's colors painted large enough to be visible from aircraft. This was territory, claimed and defended, where the law's reach ended and older rules applied. Stone killed his engine. Ray did the same, his body tense, ready for the betrayal he expected. But Stone just climbed off his bike and walked toward the main hall, gesturing for Ray to follow. Inside, the clubhouse carried the smell of motor oil, cigarette smoke, and decades of testosterone-fueled brotherhood. Pool tables. A bar that had served more fights than drinks. Walls covered with photographs of men on motorcycles, some alive, many dead, all of them wearing the same expression of defiant pride. Stone dropped into a chair at a table scarred by knife fights and broken bottles. His brothers filed in, taking positions around the room, not surrounding Ray, but close enough that running wasn't an option. Ray stood near the door, Sophia pressed against his side, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. Sit. Stone pulled out a chair, not a request. Ray sat. Sophia climbed into his lap, small enough to fit, young enough to not care about pride when fear was eating her alive. Ray's arms wrapped around her automatically, holding her the way he'd held Emma during thunderstorms. Stone studied them for a long moment, his eyes carrying calculations Ray couldn't decipher. Then he reached into his vest and pulled out a phone, scrolling through something before turning the screen toward Ray. The image showed a man and woman, both in their 30s, professionally dressed, smiling at the camera. Below their faces, text identified them as Marcus and Elena Reyes, federal investigators found murdered in their Phoenix home 2 weeks earlier. Their 7-year-old daughter was missing, presumed kidnapped. Ray's blood went cold. He looked down at Sophia, seeing the confirmation in her eyes before she buried her face against his chest. Sophia Reyes, Stone said quietly, daughter of 2 DEA agents who were investigating a cartel smuggling operation through the southern ports. They got too close. Someone decided to erase the whole family. Ray's arms tightened around Sophia. How do you know this? Because Marcus Reyes was my cousin. Stone's voice carried the weight of grief that had calcified into rage. And before those animals killed him, he called me. Said if anything happened, I needed to find his daughter, keep her safe. He knew the DEA couldn't protect her, not from the people he was investigating. The room fell silent except for Sophia's quiet breathing. Ray's mind raced, connecting pieces he should have seen earlier. The professional hunters, the systematic pursuit. This wasn't random violence. This was cartel cleanup, eliminating witnesses to crimes that went high enough to buy judges and police chiefs. Why tell me this? Ray's voice came rough. Because you saved her. Stone leaned forward, his massive frame making the chair creak. And because I need to know if you're in or out. Those men who found you aren't going away. They'll hunt her until she's dead or whoever's paying them decides she's not worth the trouble. I'm offering protection, the Brotherhood's protection. But that means you stay, follow our rules, and accept that your old life is over. Ray looked around the room at the scarred, dangerous men watching him with expressions that revealed nothing. These weren't heroes, they were outlaws, criminals,
men who'd done terrible things in pursuit of their own code. But they were also the only thing standing between Sophia and a shallow grave. And if I say no, Stone's expression didn't change. Then you walk out that door and we never met. The girl stays. We'll protect her our way. But you don't get to play hero and then disappear when the bill comes due. Either you're all in or you're gone.
Sophia's hand gripped Ray's vest. He felt her heartbeat against his chest, rapid and terrified. 3 years ago, he'd failed Emma because he chose himself over her, chose pride and anger over being present when she needed him most. Now holding another little girl who'd lost everything, Ray faced the same choice. Stay and become part of something he didn't understand, bound to men whose code he'd abandoned years ago. Or walk away and let Sophia face this nightmare with strangers, knowing he'd failed again. Emma's ghost sat in the corner of the room, watching. "What do you need from me?" Ray heard himself ask. Stone's expression shifted fractionally. Not a smile, but acknowledgement. "First, you need to understand what you're stepping into. The people hunting Sophia work for the Volkov Syndicate, Russian mob that moved into cartel territory 5 years ago. They don't just kill you, they erase you. Family, friends, anyone who might remember you existed. And they've got reach, politicians, cops, judges, all bought and paid for." One of Stone's brothers, a lean man with burn scars covering half his face, spoke up. His voice carried the rasp of someone who'd breathed too much smoke or screamed too much. "Volkov's operation moves weapons through the southern ports, military-grade shit, RPGs, surface-to-air missiles, enough hardware to supply a small war. Marcus Reyes had evidence. Shipment manifests, financial records, names of everyone involved. The syndicate killed him before he could deliver it to his superiors. And Sophia saw something," Ray said, understanding dawning. Stone nodded. "She was home when they came, hid in the closet, watched through the slats. She can identify the shooter, a man who works directly for Dmitry Volkov, the syndicate's enforcer. That's why they want her dead. She's the only witness who can put him at the scene." Ray's jaw clenched. "Then we need to get her to the feds, put her in witness protection, let the system handle it." "The system?" Stone's laugh carried no humor. "Brother, the system is compromised. How do you think professional killers knew where to find Marcus? How do you think they got past federal security? Someone inside fed them information. We put Sophia in official channels. She's dead within a week." "So what's the plan?" Stone exchanged glances with his brothers. Whatever they'd decided, it was already in motion. Marcus hid the evidence before he died. Somewhere only Sophia can find it. He set up dead man switches, contingencies, insurance policies that would automatically release everything if he didn't check in. But the syndicate got to those too, shut them down. Now the only copy is wherever Marcus stashed it, and the only person who knows the location is sitting in your lap. Ray looked down at Sophia. Her eyes met his, old beyond their years. "Do you know where your father hid the evidence?" She nodded slowly. "Daddy showed me. Before everything. He said it was our secret, in case the bad men came." "Where?" Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if speaking louder would summon the hunters. "The lake house, where we went in summer. He buried it in the garden, under the blue rocks I used to play with." Stone pulled out a map, spreading it across the table. Marcus had a property on Lake Pleasant, north of Phoenix. Isolated, rarely used, makes sense he'd hide evidence there. His finger traced a route. Problem is, it's 100 miles from here. The syndicate knows about that property. They'll be watching it. So we're walking into a trap. We're walking into war. Stone's eyes met Ray's. "But we're not going unprepared. I got 20 brothers I can call. We hit the lake house fast and hard, get the evidence, and disappear before they can organize a response. Then we leverage what we find, get Sophia federal protection that actually protects her, bring down everyone involved." It was a terrible plan. Too many variables, too much that could go wrong. Ray had seen enough combat to know that plans like this got people killed. But he also knew they were out of options. The hunters wouldn't stop. The syndicate wouldn't stop. And Sophia couldn't run forever. "When?" Ray asked. "Tomorrow night. Gives us time to scout, prepare, make sure we're not riding into something we can't handle." Stone leaned back, his expression hard. "Until then, you and Sophia stay here. Safe. Protected. But you follow Brotherhood rules. That means you don't leave without permission, don't contact anyone outside, and you accept that these men, he gestured to the scarred brotherhood around them, are your family now, because family is all that stands between her and death. Ray looked around at the outlaw bikers, seeing them clearly for the first time. These weren't gangsters or criminals playing dress-up. They were combat veterans, ex-cons, broken men who'd found belonging in the only place that would have them. Dangerous, yes. Violent, absolutely. But bound by loyalty that men in suits couldn't understand. All right, Ray's voice came steady. We're in, Aim. Stone extended his hand across the table. Ray shook it, feeling the calluses and scars that came from decades of fighting for survival. The handshake lasted 3 seconds and changed everything. When Stone released his grip, Ray Callahan was no longer just a drifter running from grief. He was Brotherhood, and the Brotherhood protected its own. The scarred man with the burned face stood up. I'll show you where you're staying. We got rooms in back. Nothing fancy, but walls and a lock. Ray nodded, standing with Sophia still held against his chest. She hadn't let go since they'd arrived, her small body trusting him completely despite every reason not to. He followed the burned man through the clubhouse, past pool tables and sleeping bikers, to a narrow hallway that led to living quarters. The room was exactly what promised. Concrete floor, single bed, a window reinforced with bars, but it was clean, secure, and most importantly surrounded by men who'd kill anyone trying to get through. Ray set Sophia on the bed gently. You should rest. She shook her head, fear flashing in her eyes. Don't leave. I'm not leaving. Ray pulled the room's only chair to the bedside and sat down. I'll be right here. You sleep. I'll keep watch. Sophia's eyes studied him, searching for the lie, finding only exhaustion and determination. Slowly, she lay down, curling into a ball that made her look even smaller than she was. Ray watched her breathing gradually slow, her body releasing into sleep despite the danger surrounding them. When he was certain she was unconscious, Ray let his head drop into his hands. The weight of everything pressed down. The violence, the responsibility, the knowledge that he'd just pledged himself to a war he couldn't win. But Emma's ghost smiled from the corner, and for the first time in 3 years, Ray felt like he was doing something right. The door opened quietly. Stone stepped in, his massive frame filling the doorway. She asleep? Ray nodded. Stone moved to the window, looking out at the compound where his brothers moved through their evening routines, maintaining bikes, drinking, talking in the low tones of men who understood each other without needing many words. You know what tomorrow means, Stone said quietly. If we get that evidence and Sophia testifies, the syndicate won't stop at her. They'll come for everyone involved. That includes you. Includes the Brotherhood. We're declaring war on people with unlimited resources and no conscience. I know. And you're still in? Ray looked at Sophia sleeping peacefully for the first time since he'd found her. He thought about Emma, about all the moments he'd missed, about the father he should have been. Then he thought about the man he was becoming, scared, certain he'd fail, but willing to try anyway. I'm in. Stone nodded slowly. Good. Because I need to tell you something about tomorrow's run. He turned from the window, his expression grave. Marcus didn't just investigate the syndicate, he infiltrated them, went deep undercover, built relationships, earned trust. And one of the people he worked closest with, one of Volkov's top enforcers, was a man Marcus thought had died years ago. Ray's blood chilled. Who? Stone pulled out his phone again, scrolling to a photograph. He turned the screen toward Ray and the world stopped making sense. The image showed a man in tactical gear standing beside Dmitry Volkov at some kind of industrial facility. The man's face was older, harder, covered in scars that hadn't existed before, but Ray recognized him immediately. Would have known that face anywhere, even transformed by years and violence. Danny Mercer, Ray's brother from the Angels. The man Ray had ridden with through 100 firefights and bar brawls. The man who'd disappeared 7 years ago after a deal gone wrong, presumed dead by everyone who knew him. Jesus Christ, Ray whispered. Marcus identified him 3 weeks before he died, Stone said. Your brother is alive. And he's the man who murdered Marcus and Elena Reyes. He's the shooter Sophia can identify. Which means tomorrow, when we hit that lake house, there's a good chance you'll be facing him across drawn weapons. The room spun. Ray gripped the chair to steady himself, his mind refusing to process what Stone was telling him. Danny, his brother,
his family, the man he'd mourned for 7 years, was alive and working for the people hunting Sophia. He'll be there?
Intel says Volkov's keeping the lake house under personal surveillance until they find Sophia. Danny Mercer is Volkov's right hand. He'll be there. Stone's eyes held no sympathy, just cold fact. You need to decide right now if you can handle that. Because if you hesitate tomorrow, if you can't pull the trigger when it matters, Sophia dies. The Brotherhood dies. And everything Marcus sacrificed for means nothing. Ray looked at Sophia sleeping peacefully, then at Emma's ghost watching from the shadows, then at his own scarred hands that had killed before and would kill again. I'll do what needs doing. Even if that means killing your brother? The question hung in the air like smoke, poisonous and inescapable. Ray thought about Danny, about the man he'd been, the loyalty they'd shared, the brotherhood that transcended blood. Then he thought about Sophia, about Emma, about all the children who depended on broken men to be better than they were. Even that, Ray said, and meant it. Stone studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Get some rest, brother. Tomorrow we ride into hell. And hell doesn't forgive mistakes. He left, closing his door behind him. Ray sat in the darkness, watching Sophia sleep, his mind spinning through impossible scenarios. Danny was alive. The knowledge should have brought joy, relief, all the emotions that came with finding someone you'd thought lost forever. Instead, Ray felt only the cold certainty of coming violence, because the man in that photograph wasn't his brother anymore. That man had murdered Sophia's parents, had hunted a child through the desert, had become something Ray didn't recognize. And tomorrow, in the blood and chaos of a firefight beside a lake that would run red before sunset, Ray would have to face what his brother had become. Would have to choose between the past he couldn't save and the future he was desperate to protect. Outside, Harley engines rumbled as Brotherhood members returned from runs, their voices carrying through the compound walls, rough, profane, alive. The sound reminded Ray of who he'd been before grief hollowed him out, before Emma died and the world stopped making sense. Now, sitting in a concrete room with a sleeping child who trusted him completely, Ray understood something he'd been running from for 3 years. Redemption wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about facing what you'd become and deciding to be something different, even if that something different meant becoming a killer to save an innocent life, even if it meant destroying the last connection to the man he used to be. Ray's hand moved to his empty pistol, checking it by habit, even though he knew it was spent. Tomorrow, Stone would provide weapons, ammunition, everything they needed for war. But no amount of hardware would prepare Ray for the moment when he locked eyes with Danny Mercer across the sights of a loaded gun and had to make the choice that would define the rest of his life. Sophia stirred in her sleep, mumbling words Ray couldn't understand. He reached out, his scarred hand resting gently on her shoulder, offering comfort she probably didn't even register. But it mattered. The gesture mattered. Being present mattered. The door opened again, quieter this time. A woman entered. Late 40s, gray streaking her dark hair, wearing jeans and a Brotherhood old lady's vest. Her eyes held the same hard wisdom Stone carried, tempered by something softer. I'm Maria, she said quietly, Stone's wife. Figured the girl might need some things, clean clothes, something to eat when she wakes up. She set a bag on the floor, then studied Ray with eyes that saw too much. You look like hell. Feel worse. Maria's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Stone told me about your brother, about what you're facing tomorrow. Ray said nothing. There was nothing to say. I lost my brother to the life, Maria continued, her voice carrying the weight of old grief. OD'd on product he was running for the cartel, found him in a motel room, needle still in his arm. I blamed everyone, the dealers, the cartel, the system that failed him. But mostly I blamed myself for not seeing how far gone he was. I'm sorry. Don't be. Maria's eyes held his. I'm telling you, because tomorrow, whatever happens with Danny, it's not your fault. Men make choices. Those choices have consequences. Your brother chose his path long before you found Sophia. You can't save people who don't want saving. You can only protect the ones who do. She left before Ray could respond, the door clicking shut behind her. Her words echoed in the silence, competing with Emma's ghost and the weight of tomorrow's violence. Ray stood, moving to the window. Through the reinforced bars, he could see the compound, bikers working on machines, brothers sharing cigarettes and stories.
the casual violence and rough affection of men who'd found family in the margins of society. This was his world now, not by choice, but by necessity. And tomorrow he'd earn his place in it the only way outlaws understood, through blood, loyalty, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for those who couldn't protect themselves. Sophia's voice, small and afraid, broke the silence. "Ray?" He turned. She sat up in bed, eyes wide with nightmare residue. "I'm here. I dreamed about my mommy. She was calling for me, but I couldn't reach her. There was fire and the bad men were laughing and—" Her voice broke. Ray crossed to the bed and sat beside her, his arms wrapping around her small frame. She collapsed against his chest, crying the way children cried when their world had shattered and adults promised safety they couldn't guarantee. "I got you," Ray whispered into her hair. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever comes, I got you. You understand? You're not alone anymore." Sophia's arms wrapped around his neck with desperate strength. Promise? Ray thought about promises he'd broken, about Emma, about his ex-wife, about every person he'd failed through weakness or absence or choosing himself over them. Then he thought about the man he was trying to become, the one who stood when running made more sense, who protected when abandonment was easier. "I promise." And this time, Ray Callahan meant to keep it. Even if keeping it meant riding into hell, even if it meant facing the ghost of his brother across drawn weapons, even if it meant dying to give this child the one thing she deserved, a chance to survive. Outside, the desert night deepened toward morning. Inside, a scarred biker held a broken child and prepared for the war that would determine if redemption was real or just another lie desperate men told themselves before the darkness swallowed them whole. The answer waited beside a lake, buried under blue rocks, guarded by men who killed children for money. And tomorrow, Ray would learn if 3 years of running from grief had taught him anything about standing his ground. Or if, like Danny Mercer, he'd already become something too broken to save. Dawn broke cold over the Iron Brotherhood compound, the kind of desert morning that promised heat but delivered only wind and the smell of coming violence. Ray stood in the garage watching 20 bikers prepare for war, checking weapons, loading magazines, their faces carrying the blank expression of men who'd made peace with dying years ago. Stone moved through the chaos like a general inspecting troops, his massive frame stopping at each brother to exchange quiet words Ray couldn't hear. The burned man, whose name Ray had learned was Torch, was securing ammunition into saddlebags with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this too many times. Maria stood near the clubhouse door, her arms crossed, watching her husband prepare to ride into something he might not return from. Ray's hands worked on autopilot, checking the Glock 17 Stone had provided. 17 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Enough to start a war, but never enough to finish one. His fingers moved across the weapon's frame, muscle memory from years he'd tried to forget returning like unwelcome guests. Sophia sat on a workbench behind him, her legs dangling, wearing clean clothes Maria had found. Jeans too big, a hoodie that swallowed her small frame. She watched Ray with eyes that understood more than a 7-year-old should. The sleep had helped, but fear still lived in every breath she took. "You scared?" she asked quietly. Ray turned to face her. Lying would be easy, comforting, wrong. "Yeah, me too." Her voice barely carried over the sound of engines and weapons. "My daddy was scared before he died. I could see it. He tried to hide it, but I knew." Ray's throat tightened. "What did he tell you? Before everything happened?" Sophia's fingers played with the hoodie's zipper, her eyes distant with memory. "He said sometimes brave people have to do scary things, and being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you know what you might lose. The wisdom of dead men, passed to children who shouldn't need it." Ray knelt in front of Sophia, bringing himself to her eye level. "Your dad was right. And when this is over, when we get that evidence and make you safe, you're going to remember him as the bravest man you ever knew. Understand?" Sophia nodded, but her eyes held questions too big for answers. Stone's voice cut through the garage. "Mount up. We ride in 5. The bikers moved with coordinated efficiency, swinging legs over Harleys, engines roaring to life in a symphony of power and threat. Ray started toward his bike, but Stone's hand landed on his shoulder. "She stays here. Maria will watch her." Ray's jaw clenched. "I promised I wouldn't leave her. And I'm promising she'll be safer here than riding into a firefight.
Stone's eyes held no room for negotiation. We need you focused, brother. Can't do that if you're worried about her catching a stray round. Every instinct screamed against it. Ray looked back at Sophia, saw the fear flash across her face, the abandonment she expected because everyone always left. I'll be back, Ray said, his voice carrying a certainty he didn't feel. Few hours. Then we're done running. Sophia's lip trembled, but she nodded. Maria appeared beside her, one hand resting protectively on the girl's shoulder. The old lady's expression promised violence to anyone who tried to get through her. It was something, but not enough. Ray climbed onto his Harley, the engine's roar vibrating through his chest. Stone led the convoy out. 21 motorcycles thundering through the canyon in formation. A war party riding toward violence they all understood and none of them could avoid. The lake house sat 40 miles north, and every mile felt like countdown to judgment. They rode through desert that gradually shifted to scrubland, then pine forest climbing toward higher elevation. The morning sun burned off the cold, but Ray barely felt it. His mind played scenarios on repeat. The lake house layout Stone had shown him, the approach vectors, the likely positions of Volkov's men, and threading through every tactical consideration, one face kept appearing, Danny Mercer, 7 years. Ray had mourned his brother for 7 years, believed him dead, carried guilt for not being there when Danny needed him most. Now that grief had transformed into something harder to name, betrayal, rage, desperate hope that Stone's intel was wrong and Danny wasn't really the monster hunting Sophia, but Ray knew better. He'd seen the photograph, seen Danny's face beside Volkov wearing tactical gear and the expression of a man who'd crossed lines he couldn't uncross. The convoy slowed as they approached the lake. Stone raised a fist, signaling halt. The bikers killed their engines in unison, silence crashing down like a physical weight. Through the trees ahead, Ray could see water reflecting morning light, and beyond it, a small cabin that looked abandoned, too quiet, too empty. Stone dismounted, his brothers following suit. Hand signals passed between them, military precision that spoke to shared combat experience. 10 men moved toward the cabin from the north. 10 more circled east. Stone and Ray approached from the west, using tree cover, weapons ready. The cabin's windows were dark, no vehicles visible. No guards posted. Ray's instincts screamed trap, but they were committed now. They reached the cabin's back wall. Stone tried the door. Unlocked. Bad sign. Professional killers didn't leave entry points unsecured unless they wanted someone to enter. Stone looked at Ray, reading the same concern in his expression, then pushed the door open. Empty. Furniture covered in dust sheets. No signs of recent occupation. Stone moved through the rooms quickly, his weapon tracking his eyes, clearing spaces with practiced efficiency. Ray followed, his finger resting beside the trigger guard, ready but not committed. The cabin was clean. Too clean. No evidence, no guards, no sign that Volkov's men had ever been here. It's a setup, Ray said quietly. Stone's expression darkened. He pulled out his phone, dialing fast. It rang twice before connecting. Maria, status. Ray couldn't hear her response, but he watched Stone's face drain of color. The massive biker's hand tightened on his phone until the case cracked. How long ago? Stone's voice stayed level through sheer will. Pause. Get everyone to the vehicles. Lockdown protocol. I'm coming back. He ended the call. His eyes met Ray's, and Ray saw something he hadn't seen before. Fear. They hit the compound 20 minutes ago. Professional team, military hardware. Maria got Sophia into the safe room, but they're pinned down. We need to move now. The world tilted. Ray's vision narrowed to a tunnel, his breath coming short. Sophia. Alone. Trapped while men who murdered children closed in. How did they know? Ray's voice came out strangled. I don't... Stone stopped. His expression shifted from fear to something worse. Realization. Betrayal. Torch appeared in his doorway, his burned face unreadable. We need to talk, Stone. Not now. We're rolling back. Yes, now. Torch's voice carried an edge Ray hadn't heard before. Because there's something you need to know about the compound attack. Stone's weapon came up fractionally. Talk fast. They knew we'd be gone. Knew exactly when we'd leave, what route we'd take, how many men you'd bring. Torch's eyes shifted to Ray. which means someone told them. Someone who knew the plan. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Ray's hand moved toward his Glock, but Stone was faster, his weapon now aimed directly at Ray's chest. "You brought him in," Torch continued. "Stranger shows up with a target, convenient story, right when Volkov needs to find her. You didn't think that was suspicious?" "I found her on the highway," Ray said, his voice steady despite the gun pointed at his heart. "I didn't know who she was, didn't know about Marcus or the syndicate or any of this. Convenient." Torch stepped further into the room. "Or you're exactly what you look like. A plant." Volkov knew Marcus had cousins in the Brotherhood, knew we'd take the girl if she showed up, so they put her in play, let you rescue her, lead us right into their trap. Ray's mind raced. The logic was sound, too sound, but wrong. Had to be wrong. "Stone, you know me. I know you rode with the Angels a decade ago. I know you disappeared for 3 years. I don't know what you became in that time." Stone's weapon didn't waver. "And right now my wife is under fire because I trusted you. I didn't—" The sound of approaching engines cut him off. Not Harleys. Heavier. Military vehicles. Stone's eyes moved to the window, seeing what Ray couldn't from his angle. "They're here," Stone said quietly. "The whole thing was a setup. Draw us out, hit the compound, catch us in the open." Torch's expression shifted to something predatory. "We fight our way out. Leave him." He gestured at Ray. "As a gift for whoever's paying him." "I'm not working for Volkov," Ray's voice came hard. "You want proof? Then let me prove it. Give me a chance to get Sophia out." "Why would I do that?" "Because if I'm really a plant, I'd run right now. But I'm standing here asking you to trust me with the one thing that matters." Ray's eyes held Stone's. "Your cousin died protecting her. I'm offering to finish what he started. If I'm lying, you can kill me yourself. But if I'm telling the truth, Sophia deserves someone who'll die before letting them take her." Stone's finger rested on the trigger. Behind him, the engine sounds grew louder. Multiple vehicles, closing fast. Decision time was measured in seconds. "You get her out," Stone said finally, lowering his weapon fractionally. "We'll buy you time. But Callahan, if you betray us, there's nowhere you can hide that I won't find you." "I won't." Stone moved to the window, his brothers gathering around him. Ray counted 6 vehicles approaching through the trees, black SUVs and a cargo truck carrying enough firepower to level the cabin. "Back way," Stone ordered. "Torch, take 3 men and get Callahan to the bikes. Everyone else, on me. We're making them earn it." The bikers moved with military precision, no hesitation, no fear. Just cold acceptance of violence and the brotherhood that transcended survival instinct. Ray followed Torch through the cabin's back door, 3 bikers flanking them as gunfire erupted from the front. The sound was deafening, automatic weapons tearing through wood and glass, Stone and his brothers returning fire with everything they had. Ray's legs pumped, covering ground toward the bikes hidden in the tree line. Behind them, the cabin was being systematically destroyed. They reached the Harleys. Torch swung onto his bike, the engine roaring to life. Ray did the same, his hands shaking with adrenaline and rage. "Follow me," Torch shouted over the gunfire. "I know a route back that might keep us ahead of them." They rode hard, engines screaming through narrow forest trails, branches whipping past close enough to draw blood. Ray's mind churned through everything that had just happened. The trap, the accusation, Stone's conditional trust that felt more like a death sentence with delayed execution. But worse than all of it, Sophia, trapped in a compound under siege, depending on him to be something he'd never managed to be before. Reliable, present, strong enough to save someone other than himself. The trail opened onto a dirt road. Torch accelerated, Ray matching his speed, the other 3 bikers forming a protective triangle around them. The compound was 15 miles east, and every second counted. Then Torch's bike slowed. Ray's instincts screamed danger before his conscious mind understood why. Torch stopped completely, killing his engine in the middle of the empty road. The 3 other bikers did the same, forming a line that blocked Ray's path forward. "What are you doing?" Ray's hand moved toward his Glock. Torch turned to face him, and in his eyes, Ray saw something that made his blood freeze. Not anger, not suspicion, calculation. "You're right about one thing, Callahan. Someone did betray us." Torch's hand rested casually on his own weapon. "But it wasn't you." Understanding hit like a physical blow. "Jesus Christ, it was you." Torch's burned face twisted into something that might have been a smile. Volkov pays better than the Brotherhood ever did, and he promised me something Stone never could, the name of the man who set the fire that destroyed my face. Turns out Marcus Reyes knew. Turns out that information is worth more than loyalty to a club that never gave me anything but scars. The three bikers with him spread out, weapons appearing in their hands. Ray was surrounded, outgunned, his Glock useless against four men who'd already decided he was dead. Stone trusted you, Ray said, buying seconds he didn't have. Stone's trust killed him. By now, Volkov's men have finished the cabin. The Brotherhood's leadership is gone. And you? Torch's weapon came up, aimed directly at Ray's head. You're the convenient scapegoat. The outsider who betrayed us. Everyone will believe it. Sophia is already dead, or will be, soon as Volkov's second team finishes with the compound. Torch's finger tightened on the trigger. You tried to play hero, Callahan, but heroes don't survive in our world. Only monsters do. And you were never monster enough. Ray's hand moved, not toward his weapon, knowing he'd never make it, but toward the Harley's throttle. He twisted hard, the bike lurching forward as Torch fired. The bullet missed by inches, wind pressure kissing Ray's ear as he accelerated into the gap between two bikers. Gunfire erupted behind him. Ray hunched low, the Harley screaming through a storm of bullets. He felt one tear through his leather vest, another cracked the bike's windshield. But he didn't slow down. Couldn't. Sophia was 15 miles away and dying, and Ray Callahan, failure, drunk, the man who let his daughter die alone, was the only thing standing between her and an ending he couldn't allow. The forest blurred past. Behind him, engines roared to life, Torch and his traitors giving chase. Ray had minutes at best. Minutes to reach the compound, find Sophia, and figure out how one man with a pistol and 3 years of grief could stop an army. The road curved. Ray took it too fast, the Harley's tires screaming, fighting physics, and losing. He corrected hard, nearly throwing the bike, but kept going. The speedometer climbed past 90. The compound appeared through the trees, smoke rising from burning buildings, the sound of sustained gunfire echoing through the canyon. Ray didn't slow down. He aimed the Harley directly at the fence line and opened the throttle all the way, the engine scream transforming into something that sounded almost human. The fence rushed toward him. Ray braced. The Harley hit chain link at 70 miles per hour and tore through it like paper, the impact nearly throwing Ray from the bike. He fought for control, tires skidding across gravel, buildings flashing past on both sides. Men in tactical gear turned toward the sound. Volkov's soldiers, professional killers who'd done this before. Ray's hand moved to his Glock as weapons swung toward him. Time slowed. He saw muzzle flashes, felt bullets pass close enough to kiss his skin. And somewhere beneath the sound of warfare and dying, Ray heard a child screaming. He followed that scream like a compass pointing north, his bike carrying him toward the main hall where Maria said she'd hidden Sophia. The safe room. Reinforced walls, a lock from the inside. It might have held. Might not be enough. Ray abandoned the Harley mid-slide, letting it crash into a wall while he hit the ground running. His boots pounded across blood-stained gravel. He crashed through the main hall's door and stopped dead. Maria lay on the floor, her body shielding the safe room's entrance, blood pooling beneath her from wounds Ray couldn't count. Her eyes were still open, still aware. She'd bought Sophia time with her life, and now that time was running out. A man stood over her wearing tactical gear, his weapon aimed at the safe room door. He turned as Ray entered, and Ray saw his face clearly for the first time in 7 years. Danny Mercer. Older. Scarred. His eyes carrying the kind of emptiness that came from killing without remorse. But still Danny. Still Ray's brother. They stared at each other across 10 feet and 7 years of death. Ray's Glock came up. Danny's rifle tracked him. Neither fired. Behind the safe room door, Sophia screamed for Ray to save her. And in that moment, frozen between the brother he'd mourned and the child he'd sworn to protect, Ray Callahan finally understood what redemption cost. Everything. Time froze in the blood-stained hall. Ray's Glock aimed at Danny's chest. Danny's rifle tracked Ray's head. Maria's labored breathing filled the silence between heartbeats. Behind the safe room door, Sophia had gone quiet. The terrible quiet of a child who'd learned that screaming only brought worse monsters. Ray, Danny's voice came rough, unused to speaking names from his old life. Lower the weapon. Can't do that, brother. Not your brother anymore. Danny's finger rested on the trigger, steady, professional. Haven't been for 7 years. Ray's hands didn't shake. All the grief, all the rage, all the desperate hope that somehow Danny was still salvageable, it crystallized into cold clarity. The man aiming a rifle at him wasn't the brother he'd mourned. That Danny had died 7 years ago. This was something else, something the syndicate had created. The girl, Ray said. Let her walk. Danny's laugh carried no humor. You know I can't. She saw my face, saw me put bullets in her parents. Only way this ends is with her dead and buried so deep, nobody ever asks questions. Then you go through me first, if that's what it takes. Maria coughed, blood bubbling at her lips. Her hand moved fractionally, reaching for the pistol that had fallen beside her when she'd taken the rounds protecting Sophia's door. Danny's eyes tracked the movement. His rifle shifted toward her. Ray fired. The Glock's report was deafening in the enclosed space. Ray's shot took Danny in the left shoulder, spinning him backward, his rifle clattering across the floor. Ray charged forward, closing the distance before Danny could recover, his boot connecting with Danny's ribs hard enough to crack bone. Danny went down but came up fast, his hand finding a knife on his tactical vest, slashing upward. Ray twisted, the blade missing his throat by inches, opening a line of fire across his chest instead. Pain exploded, but Ray didn't stop moving. He drove his elbow into Danny's wounded shoulder, feeling bone grind, hearing his brother scream. They crashed into the wall, grappling with the desperate violence of men who'd trained together, knew each other's moves, understood that hesitation meant death. Danny's knife came up again. Ray caught his wrist, slamming it against the wall once, twice, until the blade fell. She's a kid, Ray gasped, blood from his chest wound soaking his shirt. Just a goddamn kid, Danny. They're all just kids until they put you in prison. Danny's knee drove into Ray's stomach, doubling him over. Until they testify and your life is over. Danny broke free, scrambling for his rifle. Ray tackled him from behind, both men hitting the floor hard. The rifle spun away. They rolled, trading blows, each strike carrying years of brotherhood turned to betrayal. Ray ended up on top, his hands around Danny's throat, squeezing. Danny's eyes bulged, his hands clawing at Ray's face, finding the old scars, digging in. Blood ran into Ray's eyes, but he didn't let go. Couldn't. This was it. The moment that defined everything. Kill his brother or watch Sophia die. Emma's ghost watched from the corner, and Ray squeezed harder. Danny's struggles weakened. His face turned purple. Ray saw the light starting to fade from his eyes, and something inside him broke open. Not mercy, but the terrible recognition that he was becoming exactly what he'd always feared. A killer. A monster. The kind of man who strangled his own brother on a concrete floor while a child hid behind a locked door. Ray's hands loosened fractionally. Danny's boot caught him in the ribs, throwing him sideways. They separated, both gasping, both bleeding. Danny crawled toward the rifle. Ray lunged for his Glock. They came up simultaneously, weapons aimed, fingers on triggers. Don't! Maria's voice, weak but sharp, cut through the moment. Both men's eyes shifted to her. She'd managed to prop herself against the wall, her pistol aimed at Danny with shaking hands. Maria, Danny started. Shut up, she coughed blood. You were Brotherhood once, before Volkov, before you became this. Her eyes held Danny's. Stone trusted you, called you brother, and you sold us for what? Money? Revenge? What was worth this? Danny's expression cracked, something human flickering beneath the killer's mask. They promised me the man who killed my sister. Marcus Reyes had the name, I just needed to get close enough to find it. So you became a murderer. Maria's hand steadied. Killed his family, hunted his daughter, all for a name you could have just asked for. I did ask. Danny's voice broke. Marcus said no. Said some things were worth keeping secret, so I made Volkov a deal. I'd get him the evidence Marcus hid if he'd give me the name afterward. Ray's stomach turned. You sold out your own people for information? They weren't my people anymore. The Brotherhood threw me away when I was no use to them. Volkov gave me purpose. Volkov gave you an excuse, Maria said, to become something easier than dealing with your grief.
Her pistol tracked Danny's center mass. Now you got a choice. Walk away, let Sophia live, or I put you down like the rabid dog you became.
Danny's rifle stayed aimed at Ray. His expression cycled through emotions, rage, grief, something that might have been shame. Outside, gunfire intensified. Torch's voice shouted orders. More engines approached, the deep rumble of Brotherhood reinforcements arriving. They'll kill you, Danny said quietly. Volkov's men. They're not stopping until Sophia's dead. Then we die protecting her, Maria said. That's what family does.
The word hit Danny like a physical blow, his rifle lowered fractionally. I can get you out, Danny said, his eyes on Ray. Both of you, Sophia too. I still have access to Volkov's security protocols. I can create a window, buy you time to run. Why would you do that?
Danny's jaw clenched. Because Marcus Reyes gave me the name before he died, whispered it with his last breath. And you know what I found when I tracked the man down? He was already dead, killed in prison 3 years ago. My sister's murderer died before I ever knew his name. Everything I did, every person I killed, every line I crossed, it was for nothing. Silence held the room. Maria's pistol didn't waver. Help us, Ray said. Do one thing right. Let this kid survive. Danny's eyes closed. When they opened, something had shifted. Not redemption, but resignation. He lowered his rifle completely. The safe room. Code is 1847. Get her out. He pulled a radio from his vest, tossing it to Ray. Channel 6, I'll radio when the exit's clear. You'll have 60 seconds before Volkov's men realize what's happening. Ray caught the radio, not trusting this, not trusting anything about the brother who'd become a stranger. But Sophia was running out of time. Maria, go. Maria's pistol stayed trained on Danny. I'll make sure he keeps his word, or I'll make sure he never breaks another one. Ray moved to the safe room door, punching in the code with shaking hands. The lock disengaged with a heavy click. He pulled the door open. Sophia crouched in the corner, her eyes wide with terror, her small body trembling. When she saw Ray, she launched herself at him, her arms wrapping around his neck with desperate strength. I got you, Ray whispered into her hair. We're leaving, right now. He turned to find Danny watching them, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Ray saw the brother he'd known, the man who'd stood beside him in 100 fights, who'd called him family when blood relatives gave up. Then the moment passed, and Danny was a stranger again. The garage, Danny said. There's a truck, keys in the ignition. Follow the canyon road north. Don't stop until you hit the interstate. What about you? Danny's smile held no warmth. I'm dead either way. The moment I help you, Volkov will know. But maybe this way, I die for something that matters. The radio crackled. Torch's voice came through, cold and commanding. Mercer, status. Have you secured the target? Danny's eyes held Ray's as he pressed the transmit button. Target secured. Bringing her out now. Copy. Volkov wants confirmation. Visual. Negative. Target's injured. Moving her to medical evac point. Danny released the button, his expression hardening. You got maybe 3 minutes before they realize I'm lying. Use them. Ray started for the garage. Sophia clutched against his chest. He looked back once and saw Maria, still bleeding, her pistol still aimed at Danny. Their eyes met across the blood-stained hall, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or just the shared recognition of people doing terrible things for the right reasons. Then Ray was moving, running through corridors filled with smoke and the sound of dying. The garage door appeared ahead. Ray kicked through it and stopped dead. Stone stood beside a truck, his massive frame leaning against the vehicle, blood streaming from wounds Ray couldn't count. Half his brothers lay dead around him. The other half formed a defensive perimeter, their weapons trained on the chaos outside. Callahan. Stone's voice came weak. Torch betrayed us. Sold us to Volkov. I know. Danny told me. Stone's expression shifted through confusion to understanding. Your brother? Complicated. Ray moved to the truck, settling Sophia in the passenger seat. He's buying us time. We need to move. Can't. Stone gestured to his wounds. I'm done. But you get her out. Finish what Marcus started. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. Stone's hand gripped Ray's vest, his strength failing. The evidence. Sophia knows where it is. Get it. Bring down Volkov. Make my cousin's death mean something. The radio crackled. Danny's voice came through, urgent. Ray, you're out of time. They're coming. Stone released Ray's vest. Go. Be the man you wished you'd been for your daughter. Be that for her. Ray's throat closed. He climbed into the truck, his hands finding the keys exactly where Danny said they'd be. The engine roared to life. Ray! Sophia's scream cut through everything. Ray's head snapped toward her pointing finger. Through the garage door, he saw Torch and 6 men advancing, weapons raised. Behind them, black SUVs poured through the destroyed fence line. Volkov's reinforcements, too many to count, too many to fight. Stone pushed off the truck, his pistol coming up, his brothers forming a line beside him. Drive! Ray's foot hit the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires screaming. Gunfire erupted. Stone and his brothers opening up, buying seconds with their lives. Ray aimed the truck at the only gap in the chaos, a narrow space between burning buildings and advancing killers. Bullets punched through the windshield. Sophia screamed. Ray hunched over her, his body shielding hers as glass exploded around them. The truck crashed through a wall of debris and burst into open canyon, the compound shrinking in the mirror. Behind them, the battle reached its crescendo. Ray saw Stone fall, saw Torch standing over him, saw the Brotherhood's last stand ending the way these things always ended, blood and fire and men dying for causes bigger than themselves. The radio crackled one final time. Danny's voice came through, barely a whisper. Ray, the evidence. It's not at the lake house. Marcus moved it. Sophia knows. Ask her about the blue rocks. And Ray, I'm sorry. For all of it. The transmission ended. The radio went dead. Ray drove faster, the truck eating miles of canyon road while sirens wailed in the distance. Sophia pressed against him, her tears soaking his blood-stained shirt. Behind them, smoke rose from the compound. A funeral pyre for the Brotherhood, for Stone, for everyone who died protecting a child from monsters. Ray's hands gripped the wheel until his knuckles went white. The evidence. The blue rocks. Whatever Marcus Reyes had hidden, it was the only thing standing between Sophia and a bullet, the only weapon they had left against people with unlimited reach and no conscience. Sophia. Ray's voice came steady despite the chaos inside him. Your dad's hiding place, the Blue Rocks. Where are they really? Sophia looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much death. Not the lake house. That was the fake place, in case bad people asked. The real place, her voice dropped to a whisper, is where Mommy and Daddy got married, where they said their special words before I was born. Ray's mind raced. A wedding location, somewhere meaningful enough that Marcus would trust it with evidence worth dying for, somewhere Sophia would remember. Do you know where that is? Sophia nodded. The old courthouse, downtown Phoenix. Daddy showed me pictures. Said someday when I got married I could use the same place. He buried the blue rocks in the garden there, under the tree where they took their wedding picture. The old courthouse. Public property. Hundreds of people passing through daily. The perfect hiding spot, hidden in plain sight where Volkov's men would never think to look. Ray's foot pressed harder on the gas. Phoenix was 60 miles south, and every mile brought them closer to either salvation or the ambush that would end everything. The truck roared through dawn light, carrying a scarred biker and a terrified child toward a confrontation that would determine if Marcus Reyes's sacrifice meant anything. If the Brotherhood's last stand bought them enough time. If Danny's betrayal of his betrayers would matter. Behind them, the desert burned. Ahead, the city waited. And somewhere in its heart, beneath blue rocks in a courthouse garden, lay the evidence that could destroy an empire or seal their death warrants. Ray's hands didn't shake. His breath came steady. For the first time in 3 years, purpose filled the emptiness where grief had lived. Emma's ghost rode beside them, and Ray finally understood what she'd been trying to tell him all along. Redemption wasn't about fixing the past. It was about facing the future without running. Even if that future was rushing toward them at 80 miles per hour, armed with everything they'd lost and everyone who wanted them dead. The highway stretched ahead like a promise or a threat, and Ray Callahan drove toward it with a child's trust, pressed against his ribs, and nothing left to lose except the one thing he'd finally learned mattered, being present when someone needed him, even if being present meant dying to give them one more day of life. The radio crackled with static. Then Torch's voice cut through, cold and certain. Callahan, we know where you're going. and we'll be waiting." The transmission ended. The sun rose higher, burning away the last shadows of night. And somewhere ahead, in a courthouse garden where two federal agents had once promised to love each other forever, the final battle waited to determine if their daughter would survive to remember them. The Phoenix skyline rose from the desert like broken teeth against the dawn, glass towers reflecting the first light while the streets below remained trapped in shadow. Ray pushed the stolen truck through morning traffic, his eyes scanning every vehicle, every rooftop, every face that turned toward them. Torch's voice still echoed in his memory. "We'll be waiting." Sophia sat pressed against the passenger door, her small hands gripping the seatbelt like it might protect her from what was coming. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the burning compound behind, but her eyes tracked every movement Ray made, learning him, measuring whether he'd be another adult who promised safety and delivered abandonment. Ray's chest wound had stopped bleeding, but the pain was constant, a reminder that he was running on borrowed time. The Glock sat on the dashboard, 3 rounds left in the magazine. Against an organization like Volkov's Syndicate, 3 bullets was a prayer whispered into a hurricane. But prayers were all he had left. The old courthouse sat in downtown Phoenix like a monument to forgotten justice, its limestone facade darkened by decades of exhaust and political corruption. Ray parked 2 blocks away, in an alley behind a Vietnamese restaurant that hadn't opened yet. He killed the engine and sat in the sudden silence, his hands still gripping the wheel, his mind running through scenarios that all ended badly. "Is this where my daddy hid the evidence?" Sophia's voice came small but steady. Ray turned to face her. In the dawn light, she looked impossibly young, her face still carrying bruises from the desert, her eyes carrying scars that would never fully heal. 7 years old, and she'd already learned that the world was cruel, that adults failed you, that safety was a lie told by people who wanted you to stop screaming. "Yeah," Ray's voice came rough. "Your dad was smart, hid it where nobody would think to look. The bad men are here, aren't they? Waiting for us." No point lying. Sophia had earned the truth through everything she'd survived. "Probably. But we're not running anymore. We get that evidence, we end this. Make your parents' sacrifice mean something." Sophia studied him with eyes that held too much understanding. "What if we die?" The question hung between them like smoke. Ray thought about Emma, about the hospital room where she'd died alone, about all the promises he'd broken through weakness and absence. Then he thought about Stone falling in the compound, about Maria bleeding to protect a child who wasn't hers, about Danny choosing redemption too late to matter. "Then we die trying," Ray said quietly. "But I promise you this, Sophia. Whatever happens in that courthouse, you don't face it alone. Not this time." Her hand reached across the seat, small fingers wrapping around his scarred knuckles. The gesture carried more weight than any oath sworn in blood. Ray checked the Glock one final time, then climbed out of the truck. Sophia followed, her hand finding his immediately, holding tight. They walked toward the courthouse like father and daughter heading to a custody hearing, just 2 more damaged people navigating a city that didn't care whether they lived or died. The courthouse steps were empty this early. Ray scanned the surrounding buildings, looking for sniper positions, surveillance, the telltale signs of ambush. Nothing obvious, but men like Torch didn't telegraph their presence. They waited in shadows until your guard dropped, then they struck. The entrance was locked, wouldn't open for another 2 hours when municipal workers arrived. Ray led Sophia around to the side where a small garden stretched between the courthouse and the adjacent building. Chain-link fence, overgrown with ivy and neglect, separated them from the space where Marcus and Elena Reyes had taken their wedding photos. Ray pulled at the fence. Rusted metal groaned but held. He looked around, found a section where the bottom had pulled away from the post, and yanked harder. The fence tore free with a sound that echoed through the empty morning. They slipped through. The garden was smaller than Ray expected, maybe 20 feet square, dominated by a single mesquite tree that looked older than the courthouse itself. Beneath its branches, someone had placed a stone bench, weathered smooth by decades of rain and sun. There. Sophia pointed to a patch of blue river rocks arranged in a circle around the tree's base. "Daddy said the rocks were the same color as Mommy's eyes. He showed me pictures." Ray knelt beside the rocks, his hands moving them aside carefully, revealing packed earth underneath. He started digging with his bare hands, dirt collecting under his fingernails, his wounded chest screaming protest with every movement. Sophia knelt beside him, her small hands helping, both of them excavating like archaeologists searching for artifacts that would explain why the world hurt so much. 6 inches down, Ray's fingers hit plastic. He dug faster, uncovering a waterproof case about the size of a shoebox. His hands trembled as he pulled it free, wiping dirt from the surface to reveal a combination lock. "Do you know the code?" Sophia nodded. Her fingers moved across the dial with practiced precision. "Oh, 723. The lock clicked open. Inside, Ray found a USB drive wrapped in plastic, a handwritten letter, and a small stuffed rabbit that had clearly belonged to Sophia before everything fell apart. Sophia's breath caught when she saw the rabbit. Her hands reached for it instinctively, pulling it against her chest like it could somehow reverse time and bring her parents back. Tears streamed down her face, silent and devastating. Ray's throat tightened. He looked away, giving her privacy for grief, and picked up the letter. Marcus Reyes's handwriting was precise, controlled, the script of a man who knew he was writing his last words. "To whoever finds this." The attached drive contains evidence of the Volkov Syndicate's weapons trafficking operation, shipment manifests, financial records, communications between Dmitry Volkov and 3 sitting federal judges, 2 senators, and the deputy director of the DEA. Everything you need to dismantle their organization and prosecute everyone involved. But understand this. The moment you access this drive, you become a target. These people don't stop. They don't forgive. They erase threats to their power. If you're reading this, I'm already dead. My wife is probably dead. And my daughter, God, I pray my daughter survived long enough for someone to find her. If she's with you, protect her. Not for me, not for justice, but because she deserves to grow up in a world where evil doesn't always win. Marcus Reyes. Ray folded the letter carefully and tucked it back in the case. His eyes moved to Sophia, still clutching the rabbit, her tears soaking into its synthetic fur. "Your dad loved you," Ray said quietly. "Everything he did, risking his life, hiding this evidence, setting up all these contingencies, it was all to give you a chance." "But he's still dead," Sophia's voice cracked. "Loving me didn't save him." "No, but it saved you." And that's what parents do. They burn themselves out so their kids can have light. Ray stood, the evidence case tucked under his arm, and extended his free hand to Sophia. She took it, still holding the rabbit, and they started back toward the fence. That's when Ray heard it, the distinctive click of a weapon's safety disengaging. "Stop right there, Callahan." Ray froze. Sophia pressed against his leg. He turned slowly to find Torch standing 20 feet away, his burned face twisted into something that might have been a smile. 6 men flanked him, all armed, all positioned with professional precision. "Impressive," Torch said, his weapon aimed at Ray's chest. "You made it this far. Survived the compound, avoided our roadblocks, found the evidence. But you had to know this was where it ended." Ray's hand moved fractionally toward the Glock tucked in his belt. Torch's gun tracked the movement. "Don't. You're fast, Callahan, but not faster than 7 guns. Best case, you take me with you. The girl still dies." Ray's jaw clenched. His mind raced through options that didn't exist. He was outgunned, wounded, running on empty. And Sophia, small, terrified Sophia, deserved better than dying in a courthouse garden because Ray Callahan had finally tried to do something right. "Let her go," Ray said. "You want the evidence? Take it. But she walks." Torch's laugh carried no warmth. "Can't do that, brother. She's seen too much. Knows too much. Only way this ends clean is if she disappears. But I'll make you a deal. Give me the case now, and I'll make it quick for both of you. No pain, just sleep." "That's not a deal. That's surrender." "It's the only mercy you're getting." Ray's hand tightened on the evidence case. His other hand rested on Sophia's shoulder, feeling her small body trembling beneath his palm. Emma's ghost stood beside the mesquite tree, watching, waiting to see what kind of man Ray had finally become. "I got a better idea," Ray said quietly. "I start shooting, you start shooting, and we find out if 7 of you can kill me before I get this drive into the hands of people who'll burn your entire organization to the ground." "You're bluffing." "Try me." The standoff held, 7 armed killers facing 1 wounded biker and a child. The mathematics of violence balanced on the edge of a trigger pull. Then engines roared in the distance. Multiple engines, deep and powerful, the unmistakable thunder of Harley-Davidsons approaching fast. Torch's expression shifted. His men exchanged glances, uncertainty rippling through their formation. The engines grew louder, closer, and suddenly the street beyond the garden erupted with motorcycles. 10 Harleys roared into view, their riders wearing leather vests marked with patches Ray didn't recognize. Different clubs, different charters, all united by something stronger than territorial rivalry. They dismounted in unison, forming a semicircle that boxed Torch and his men against the courthouse wall. The lead rider was a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back, arms covered in tattoos that told stories of decades surviving in a world that tried to kill her. She walked forward with the confidence of someone who'd stared down worse men than Torch and lived to bury them. Maria called in a favor before she died, the woman said, her voice carrying easy authority. Said the Brotherhood needed backup protecting Marcus Reyes's daughter. We're here to pay that debt. Torch's weapon swung toward her. This doesn't concern you. Wrong. It concerns every club in the Southwest. Because word's out about what you did, selling out the Brotherhood, working for the Russians, hunting a child for blood money. That kind of betrayal. That concerns all of us. More engines approached. Ray counted another 15 motorcycles flooding the street, their riders dismounting, weapons appearing in their hands. Clubs that normally fought each other over territory and pride, now standing united against something they all recognized. A traitor who'd broken the code that bound outlaw society together. Torch was surrounded, outnumbered 3-1, his 6 men looking increasingly nervous. But his weapon never wavered from Ray's chest. You want a war? Torch's voice stayed level. I'll give you a war, but Callahan dies first. The girl dies first. And that evidence burns before any of you get within 10 feet. The woman's expression hardened. Then I guess we all die here, because we're not letting you walk out. Time crystallized. Ray saw it playing out. Torch firing, Ray firing back. Sophia caught in the crossfires, 30 people opened up in a courthouse garden. Everyone dying for evidence that might not even matter if nobody survived to deliver it. Then a voice cut through the tension, unexpected and impossible. Stand down, Torch. Everyone turned. Danny Mercer walked through the garden gate, his left arm in a makeshift sling, blood soaking through his tactical vest, his face carrying the exhaustion of a man who'd already accepted death. He moved slowly, hands visible, his weapon holstered. The hell are you doing here? Torch's gun shifted toward Danny. Volkov wants you dead for letting them escape. I know. Danny stopped 10 feet from Ray, his eyes meeting his brother's across the distance. But I'm done taking orders from men who kill children. I'm done being what the syndicate made me. So here's what's happening. You lower your weapons, you walk away, and maybe some of you live to see tomorrow. Or you shoot, we all die. And the evidence gets uploaded to every news outlet in America within the hour. Torch's expression twisted with rage. You set up a dead man's switch. Learn from Marcus Reyes, if I don't check in every 6 hours, everything on that drive goes public. And I stopped checking in about 5 hours ago. Danny's eyes never left Torch. So you got 1 hour to disappear before the whole world knows what Volkov's been doing. 1 hour before federal raids hit every syndicate property in the Southwest. 1 hour before you become the most wanted men in America. Torch's finger tightened on the trigger. Ray saw the calculation in his eyes, weighing the cost of revenge against survival, pride against pragmatism. The moment stretched until it felt like the universe was holding its breath. Then Torch lowered his weapon. This isn't over, he said quietly. Volkov will hunt all of you until there's nothing left. Let him try. The woman biker stepped forward, her presence radiating threat. We'll be ready. Torch gestured to his men. They backed toward their vehicles slowly, weapons still raised, eyes tracking the assembled bikers who watched them leave with expressions that promised violence if anyone made a wrong move. Engines started. Black SUVs pulled away, disappearing into Phoenix traffic. Silence crashed down. Ray stood motionless, still shielding Sophia, his hand still gripping the evidence case. He looked at Danny, seeing his brother clearly for the first time in 7 years. Not the ghost he'd mourned, not the monster he'd discovered, but something in between. A man who'd made terrible choices and was trying, too late, to make one right one. You set up the dead man's switch, Ray said, before you came to the compound. Yeah.
Danny's expression carried the weight of everything he'd done and couldn't undo. Marcus showed me how, before he died. Taught me how to build insurance policies that would destroy the people we both hated. I just needed the courage to use them. Why now?
Danny's eyes moved to Sophia, still clutching her rabbit, still pressed against Ray's leg. Because I saw what I'd become, what hunting her made me. And I remembered having a sister her age once, before cancer took her, before I let grief turn me into something that would have made her ashamed. The confession hung in the morning air. Ray thought about Emma, about all the ways grief had poisoned him, about how close he'd come to becoming exactly what Danny described. The only difference was that Ray had found Sophia before the poison killed what was left of his humanity. The evidence, Danny continued, it's real. Everything Marcus documented, every name, every transaction. It's enough to bring down Volkov's entire operation, but you need to get it to someone who won't get bought, someone outside the system. The woman biker stepped forward. I know someone. Federal prosecutor, can't be bribed, owes our club a favor that'll cover this. We get the drive to her, she'll make it count. Ray looked down at Sophia. What do you want to do?
Sophia's eyes, old beyond their years, studied the assembled bikers, rough men and women who looked like they'd break bones before breakfast, but who'd ridden into danger to protect a child they didn't know. Then she looked at Danny, the man who'd killed her parents, standing broken and bleeding in a courthouse garden. I want them to pay, she said quietly. Everyone who hurt my family, I want them to pay so bad it hurts. They will, the woman promised. We'll make sure of it. Ray extended the case toward her. She took it carefully, like she was holding something sacred. Maybe she was. Marcus and Elena Reyes had died for this evidence. Stone and Maria and a dozen Brotherhood members had burned to protect it. The least they could do was make sure it mattered. What about him? One of the bikers gestured toward Danny. He killed federal agents, worked for Volkov. We just letting him walk? Ray turned to his brother, seeing the question in Danny's eyes. What happens now? What price does redemption demand? He doesn't walk, Ray said quietly. He comes with us. Testifies. Tells prosecutors everything he knows about Volkov's operation. Then he takes whatever prison sentence they give him and serves every day knowing he earned it. Danny's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, acceptance maybe, or relief that someone had finally told him the truth he'd been running from. All right, I can do that. And when you get out, Ray continued, his voice hard, you find me, because we're not done. Not until you've looked Sophia in the eyes when she's old enough to understand, and you've explained why you killed her parents. Not until you've carried that weight the way I carried Emma's death. Not until you've learned what it costs to fail the people who depend on you. I already know that cost, brother. No. You know guilt. I'm talking about living with it, waking up every day for the rest of your life knowing you can't fix what you broke. That's the price. You willing to pay it? Danny looked at Sophia, then back at Ray. Yeah, I'm willing. The woman biker gestured toward the motorcycles. We need to move. Torch might have backed down, but Volkov won't. We get this evidence delivered, get the girl somewhere safe, then we disappear until the federal hammer drops. The assembled bikers began mounting their Harleys, engines rumbling to life, the sound echoing through downtown Phoenix like thunder promising rain. Ray started toward the truck, but Sophia's hand tugged his vest. Where do I go now? Her voice carried the fear of a child who'd lost everything and didn't trust that anything would last. After the evidence gets delivered, after the bad men go to jail, where do I go? Ray knelt in front of her, bringing himself to her level, his scarred hands resting on her small shoulders. You got an aunt, right? Your mom's sister? Sophia nodded. Aunt Claire. But I haven't seen her in a long time. What if she doesn't want me? Then you come with me. The words came out before Ray could stop them, before his rational mind could explain all the reasons it was a terrible idea. But looking at Sophia, bruised, terrified, trusting him despite every reason not to, Ray knew he meant it. I'll figure something out. Get clean, find work. Become someone who can actually take care of you. It won't be easy, and I'll probably screw up more times than I get it right. But I won't leave you. Not ever. You understand? Sophia's arms wrapped around his neck, her face buried against his shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs that had been building since the moment she'd watched her parents die. Ray held her, his own tears burning behind his eyes, and felt something shift in his chest, not healing, because that would take years,
but the first small crack in the armor of grief he'd worn for so long. The woman biker approached, her expression softer now. The girl needs proper care, medical attention, therapy, someone who knows how to help kids who've seen what she's seen. I know people, good people. They'll make sure she's safe while the legal stuff gets sorted. I stay with Ray. Sophia's voice was muffled against his shoulder, but firm. He promised. And I'll keep that promise, Ray said. But she's right. You need help I can't give you, just for a little while, until we know you're okay. Then I'll come get you. I swear it. Sophia pulled back, her eyes searching his face for the lie, finding only exhaustion and determination. You promise? Really promise? Really promise. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Ray stood, his knees protesting, his chest wound sending fresh waves of pain through his torso. Danny approached, his movements careful, his expression unreadable. For what it's worth, Danny said quietly, I'm sorry. For Emma. For not being there when you needed me. For becoming something you had to fight. Ray's jaw clenched. Part of him wanted to accept the apology, to find forgiveness and move forward. But a larger part, the part that still carried Emma's ghost, that still woke up screaming from dreams where she called for him, couldn't let it go that easily. Sorry doesn't fix anything, Ray said, but maybe doing the right thing from here on does. So stay alive long enough to testify. Make sure Volkov and everyone like him burns. That's how you apologize. Danny nodded. Federal sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The bikers mounted their Harleys, preparing to scatter before authorities arrived, with questions nobody wanted to answer. Time to go, the woman called. Callahan, you ride with me. The girl goes with Teresa and Rachel. They'll get her to the safe house. She gestured to two women in their 40s, both wearing patches that identified them as old ladies from clubs Ray respected. Ray looked at Sophia. She looked back, fear and trust warring in her expression. Then she walked toward Teresa, her hand reaching out, finding the older woman's palm. Teresa knelt down, speaking quietly to Sophia, her voice too low for Ray to hear, but her tone carrying the gentle authority of someone who'd raised children through chaos. Sophia glanced back at Ray one more time. He nodded, trying to communicate everything he couldn't say. That he meant his promise, that she wasn't alone, that sometimes the world gave you people worth trusting even when trust seemed impossible. Then she climbed onto the back of Teresa's Harley, her small arms wrapping around the woman's waist, and the engine roared to life. Ray watched them pull away. Sophia's face turned toward him until distance and traffic swallowed them. His chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that mattered. But beneath the emptiness, something else stirred. Purpose, maybe? Or just the stubborn refusal to let another child down. We need to move, the woman biker said. You can fall apart later. Right now, we ride. Ray climbed onto the back of her Harley, his arms wrapping around her waist as the engine thundered beneath them. The convoy pulled out, scattering in different directions, 20 motorcycles carrying people who'd chosen to stand against something bigger than themselves. Danny remained in the courthouse garden, sitting on the stone bench beneath the mesquite tree, waiting for federal agents who would arrest him, question him, eventually use his testimony to dismantle an empire built on blood. Ray watched him shrink in the mirror, this ghost of his brother finally becoming real again, and felt something close to closure. Not forgiveness? Not yet. But acknowledgement that broken people sometimes found ways to be less broken, even if it took destroying themselves to get there. The Harley carved through Phoenix traffic, weaving between cars, the wind tearing at Ray's face. His chest wound throbbed. His body was shutting down from blood loss and exhaustion. But he held on, because that's what you did when you still had promises to keep. They rode for an hour, leaving the city behind, heading into desert that stretched empty and infinite. Finally, the woman pulled off onto a dirt road that led to a small compound, mobile homes, a garage, solar panels, the infrastructure of people who'd chosen to live outside society's reach. She killed the engine. Ray climbed off, his legs barely supporting his weight. The woman steadied him with surprising strength. You need medical attention. We got a doc who doesn't ask questions. I need to know Sophia's safe first. The woman pulled out her phone, made a call, spoke quietly. She listened, nodded, then handed the phone to Ray. Sophia's voice came through, small but steady. Ray? Yeah, kid. You okay? I'm okay.
Teresa says this place is nice. They have other kids here, kids like me who... Her voice trailed off. I know. Ray's throat tightened. You're safe there, and I'll visit as soon as I can. Few days, maybe. Just gotta heal up first. Okay. Pause. Ray? Thank you for not leaving me, for keeping your promise. Thank you for trusting me, for giving me a reason to stop running. The call ended. Ray handed the phone back, his hand shaking. The woman guided him toward one of the mobile homes, inside to a makeshift clinic where a man in his 60s waited with medical supplies that looked too professional to be entirely legal. Sit, the doc ordered. Let's see what you did to yourself. Ray sat. The doc cut away his shirt, revealing the knife wound across his chest. Angry, infected, needing stitches, Ray couldn't afford to get in a hospital where questions would be asked. The doc worked in silence, cleaning, suturing, his hands carrying the competence of someone who'd patched up outlaws for decades. You're lucky, the doc said. Infection's not too bad. Another day you'd be septic. Don't feel lucky. Never do. The doc finished the last stitch, bandaged the wound, and handed Ray antibiotics. Take these. Rest. Don't die on me before the girl gets to see you again. Ray swallowed the pills dry, his body already starting to shut down now that adrenaline wasn't forcing it to function. The woman reappeared, holding clothes that actually fit and smelled clean. Shower's through there. Take your time. When you're done, we'll talk about what happens next. Ray showered until the water ran clear, washing away blood and dirt and the physical evidence of everything he'd survived. He dressed slowly, his body protesting every movement, then emerged to find the woman waiting with coffee that smelled better than anything Ray remembered tasting. What's your name? Ray asked, accepting the cup. Angela. Ride with the Desert Queens, Northern Arizona Charter. Been doing this, protecting people who can't protect themselves, for about 30 years. Why help us? Angela's expression hardened. Because I had a daughter once, 7 years old, same as Sophia. Monsters took her, hurt her in ways I can't talk about without breaking things. By the time I found her, she was gone. Not dead, but gone inside where it matters. So when Maria called saying there was a little girl who needed protection from the same kind of monsters, I didn't hesitate. None of us did. Ray's hands tightened on the coffee cup. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just do right by Sophia. Be the person I couldn't be for my daughter. That's payment enough. They sat in silence, drinking coffee, watching the desert morning heat shimmer across the landscape. Eventually, Angela spoke again. The evidence will hit the news in about 6 hours. Federal prosecutors are already coordinating raids across 3 states. By tomorrow, Volkov's organization will be crippled. Danny's testimony will make sure it stays dead. And Sophia? Safe. We'll keep her that way until her aunt can be vetted. If the aunt checks out, Sophia goes to family. If not... Angela's eyes met Ray's. You serious about taking her? Yeah. You know what that means? Background checks, social services, proving you're stable enough to care for a traumatized kid. You got a record, Callahan. That makes it hard. I know. Ray's voice stayed steady. But I'll do whatever it takes. Get clean, find legitimate work, become someone who passes their tests. Because I made her a promise. And I'm done breaking promises to little girls. Angela studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I'll make some calls. We got lawyers who specialize in this, helping people who deserve custody fight the system that doesn't want to give it to them. It'll take time, months, maybe longer, but if you're willing to do the work, we'll help you fight. I'm willing. Angela stood, extending her hand. Ray shook it, feeling the strength in her grip, the unspoken oath passing between them, people who'd failed before promising to do better this time. Rest, Angela said. Tomorrow we start figuring out who you need to become. Tonight, you just survive. She left. Ray collapsed onto the bed, his body finally giving permission to stop fighting. Sleep came fast and dark, dreamless for the first time in 3 years. When he woke, afternoon light streamed through the window and his phone was buzzing with a text from an unknown number. Federal raid successful. Volkov in custody. Torch dead. Tried to run. Didn't make it. Danny's testimony already yielding arrests. Evidence was everything Marcus promised. You did it. Angela. Ray read the message 3 times, trying to feel something. Victory, relief, closure. But all he felt was exhausted. The war was over, but the hardest part was just beginning. Becoming someone worthy of the trust a 7-year-old had placed in him. Learning how to be present instead of running. Figuring out how to live with the ghosts that would never fully leave. He spent the next weeks in Angela's compound, healing physically while working on the harder injuries. Attended meetings for people trying to stay sober. Talked to therapists who specialized in PTSD and grief. Started building the paper trail that would prove to social services he was more than his past mistakes. Teresa brought Sophia to visit every few days. They'd sit on the porch, not talking much, just existing in each other's presence. Sophia was slowly coming back to herself, laughing occasionally, playing with other kids, beginning to believe that maybe the worst was behind her. During one visit, she asked the question Ray had been dreading. "Are you going to be my dad now?" Ray's throat tightened. "I don't know if I can be a dad, Sophia. I failed at it once. Failed so bad my daughter died without me there." "But you're here now." Sophia's hand found his. "That's different, isn't it?" "Yeah, it's different." "Then maybe you just need practice, being here, not running away when things get scary." The wisdom of children who'd survived horrors teaching adults how to live. Ray squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe you're right." 2 months later, Sophia's aunt arrived, a woman named Claire who looked like Elena Reyes and carried the same gentle strength Marcus had described in his letter. She and Sophia spent hours talking, crying, beginning to build the connection that trauma had interrupted. Ray watched from a distance, preparing for the goodbye he knew was coming. Sophia deserved family, deserved someone with stability and resources and the ability to provide things a broken biker never could. But when Claire approached him on her last day, her expression held something unexpected. "Sophia talks about you constantly," Claire said, "about how you saved her, protected her, kept your promises when everyone else failed." "I just did what anyone would have done." "No, you did what a father does." Claire's eyes held his. "I'm taking Sophia back to Colorado. She'll have therapy, school, a stable home, but she needs you in her life too. As an uncle, a friend, whatever works. Would you be willing to stay connected, visit when you can, be part of her recovery?" Ray's vision blurred. "Yeah, I'd like that." "Good. Because you saved her life, Ray. The least we can do is let you be part of it." Sophia appeared then, running across the compound yard, her small body slamming into Ray's legs with enough force to make him stagger. He caught her, lifting her up, holding her the way he used to hold Emma before cancer taught them both that time was precious. "You're not saying goodbye forever," Sophia said, her voice fierce. "Promise me." "I promise. I'll visit, write letters, call every week, whatever you need." "I need you to be okay." Her small hands framed his scarred face. "Like I'm going to be okay. We both get to be okay now. That's the deal." Ray's tears finally came, 3 years of grief and guilt and desperate hope breaking through the armor he'd worn for so long. That's the deal. They stood like that for a long time, a broken man and a broken child holding each other while the desert wind whispered through the compound. When they finally separated, Claire took Sophia's hand, leading her toward the car that would carry them back to normal life. Sophia turned back once, her face carrying the same expression she'd worn in that courthouse garden, trust mixed with fear, hope fighting against the knowledge that adults failed you. But this time, Ray didn't look away. He met her eyes, nodded once, and mouthed the words she needed to hear. "I'll be here." The car pulled away. Ray watched until it disappeared into desert heat shimmer, then turned to find Angela waiting with another cup of coffee. "You did good, Callahan." "Doesn't feel like it." "Never does. That's how you know it mattered." She handed him the coffee. "What now?" Ray thought about the question, about all the roads that had led him to this compound in the middle of nowhere. 3 years ago, he'd been running from Emma's death, convinced he deserved nothing but the emptiness chasing him. Now, standing in the afternoon sun with healing wounds and a promise to keep, he finally had an answer. "Now I do the work. Become someone worth trusting. Figure out how to live with what I've lost and what I've found." He looked at Angela. "You mentioned the Queens do protection work. People who need help when the system fails them." "We do." "You need another rider?" Angela's expression shifted, something like approval crossing her face. "You know what you're signing up for? It's not glory. It's hard miles, harder choices, protecting people who can't pay you back. Most days you'll wonder if it matters. Some days you'll wish you'd stayed gone. I know. Ray's voice carried the certainty of a man who'd finally stopped running. But maybe that's exactly what I need, a reason to get up that's bigger than my grief. People depending on me to show up, a family that doesn't give up when things get hard. The Brotherhood lost a lot of good people protecting Sophia, Stone, Maria, brothers whose names you never learned. You willing to honor that sacrifice by becoming what they were? Silent protectors. Wounded veterans who chose to stand between innocent people and the darkness. Ray thought about Stone's last words. Be the man you wished you'd been for your daughter. Thought about Maria bleeding to protect a child who wasn't hers. Thought about all the broken people who'd chosen to be something better than their pasts. Yeah, I'm willing. Angela extended her hand. Then welcome to the Desert Queen's prospect. You got a long road ahead of you, but you won't walk it alone. Ray shook her hand, feeling the weight of the oath settle across his shoulders, like leather he'd finally earned the right to wear. The desert stretched infinite around them, beautiful and brutal and indifferent to human suffering. But somewhere in Colorado, a little girl was learning to laugh again. And somewhere in federal prison, Danny Mercer was paying for his sins while making sure Volkov's empire stayed buried. The ghosts would never fully leave. Emma would always ride beside him, a reminder of what he'd lost and why presence mattered. But maybe that was okay. Maybe carrying your dead was part of what made you capable of protecting the living. Ray finished his coffee as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow he'd start prospecting, learning the Queen's ways, proving himself worthy of their colors, becoming part of something bigger than his grief. But tonight, he sat on the porch of a mobile home in the middle of nowhere, watching the day end and the stars emerge, feeling the weight of promises kept and the hope that maybe, just maybe, redemption was real. His phone buzzed, a text from Sophia. Made it home. Aunt Claire is nice. Miss you already. Ray smiled, the expression feeling foreign on his scarred face, but earned. He typed back, Miss you too, kid. Talk soon. Stay strong. Her response came immediately. You too, Ray. Don't forget our deal. He couldn't. The deal was simple. Both of them got to be okay now. Both of them got to survive the darkness and find something resembling light on the other side. Ray Callahan had spent 3 years riding empty highways, searching for death that never came. Now, finally, he'd found something worth living for. Not happiness. That would take time, maybe years, maybe never. But purpose, connection, the stubborn determination to be present for the people who needed him, even when presence hurt. The desert night deepened around him, cold and infinite. Somewhere in the darkness, other broken people rode lonely roads, searching for meaning in a world that offered none. But here, in this compound where outcasts had built family from scraps and loyalty, Ray Callahan had finally stopped running. And in the silence between heartbeats, he heard Emma's voice one last time, not haunting him, but releasing him, giving him permission to live without her, to be the father he couldn't be for her by being the protector Sophia needed. The wind carried her whisper away into the desert night. Ray closed his eyes, let the tears come, and for the first time in 3 years, felt something close to peace. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new people who needed protection, new chances to fail or succeed. But tonight, Ray Callahan, scarred, broken, finally healing, sat beneath the stars and remembered what it felt like to be human, to hurt, to hope, to keep promises when every instinct screamed to run. And somewhere in Colorado, a little girl slept safely in her aunt's house, holding a stuffed rabbit and dreaming of the scarred biker who'd kept his word when the world told her nobody ever would. The story didn't end with triumph. It ended with survival, with the hard work of becoming better than you were, with the quiet knowledge that sometimes love meant showing up, staying present, and refusing to abandon people even when abandonment would be easier. Ray stood, his healing wounds protesting, and walked inside to sleep. Tomorrow he'd start earning his place among the desert queens. Tomorrow he'd begin the long journey of proving himself worthy of trust. But tonight he'd kept his promises. And that was enough. The desert swallowed the compound in darkness, infinite and unforgiving. But inside that darkness, small lights burned, motorcycles maintained by careful hands, coffee brewing for early risers, people choosing to stand against a world that tried to break them. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the canyon and engines roared to life, Ray Callahan would ride beside them. Not running anymore. Finally, home.